Hey guys, tonight, we glide silently down the Nile, warm wind brushing against your cheeks as lotus blossoms drift past like forgotten dreams. On a polished cedar barge bigger than your neighborhood, Starbucks gilded statues shimmer in the torchlight, and somewhere behind you, a royal cat yawns on a velvet cushion. Because tonight, you're not just watching history, you're in it. Following the outrageous, luxurious, occasionally bonkers travel life of ancient pharaohs, who basically turned go big or stay home into a full-time job. You'll witness golden chariots and underwater crypts, fake gods, real orgies, and the occasional murder at sea. But fair warning, you probably won't survive this. Heat-stroke war, elephants, volcanic eruptions, cursed tombs, and more awkward diplomacy than a UN family dinner await you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet are already sore. Not from walking, please, you're on a royal barge, but from the absurd amount of standing and bowing everyone does when the pharaoh so much as yawns. You're here because Pharaoh Amenhotep III has decided to go on a casual 1,000-mile vacation up the Nile, as one does when you rule everything the sun touches. This isn't just a cruise. It's a mobile court, a floating festival, a tax audit on water. Dozens of ships flank the main barge, stuffed with scribes, guards, musicians, priests, pet monkeys, and way too many jars of perfume. The smell is equal parts divine and suffocating. Lavender, myrrh, and roasted goose hang in the humid air like invisible scarves. If you've ever been in a sauna while someone spills wine and plays flutes badly, that's the vibe. You glance down, polished planks beneath your feet were imported from Lebanon. Egypt didn't really do trees, so the pharaoh just borrowed a forest. Because if you're going to cruise, might as well cruise in someone else's national treasure. Behind you, Amenhotep lounges on a throne piled with lion pelts, a leopard draped over the arm like an accessory. He's only 16 but wears enough eye makeup to shame a Kardashian. Beside him, his great royal wife Tia checks a silver mirror and whispers about the governor's daughter who tripped getting on board scandal. Every servant within earshot pretends they're deaf. You pass towns. Well, towns pass you. Fields blur into temples, children wave, and priests line the banks to perform the greeting of the river rite. They chant, toss herbs into the water, and try not to look like they want to throw themselves aboard for a better life. Because in this age, the pharaoh is not just a man. He is Horus, living god, tan fabulous and extremely full of himself. Now here's your historical fact for the night. Pharaohs often did these Nile tours during the said festival, a ceremonial rejuvenation ritual held around year 30 of their reign. Or in Amenhotep's case, whenever he wanted to remind people he was divine and definitely not bloated from too many honey cakes. But here's the fringe bit. Some scholars believe these river cruises weren't just public relations, they were surveillance missions. Royal scribes documented how much grain villages had, how many goats were limping, and whether local priests were properly praising the king in their morning chants. If not, hello, temple tax audit. Or worse, a replacement priest who sings louder. On day 3, the procession pulls into Wosit, modern-day Luxor, and the barge explodes in activity. Servants leap to unload gifts, dancers pour out like glittering ants, and Amenhotep stands to wave with that slow, calculated turn of the wrist all pharaohs seem to master. You follow behind as he disembarks onto alabaster steps carried partway in a litter. Drummers strike up a rhythm that seems to vibrate your teeth. Here, the priests of Amun await. Their shaved heads glisten in the sun, and they bow so low their noses nearly scrape the marble. One is already crying, maybe from awe, maybe from heat stroke, or maybe because he knows the pharaoh is about to spontaneously offer 1,000 cows to the temple, funded by, you guessed it, temple taxes. And yet historians still argue whether these rituals were acts of piety or pure propaganda. Was Amenhotep really strengthening spiritual ties to Amun, or just reminding the priesthood who paid for those new gold altar rails? Either way, you're here for the show. That evening, the barge becomes a floating rave. Colored lanterns sway from rigged-up poles. Musicians from Nubia, Canaan, and the Delta take turns performing, trying not to make eye contact with the royal family. A harper sings about the shortness of life and the sweetness of wine, and somewhere behind you, a noble loudly weeps into his cup, probably over taxes. You look up. The stars explode above like shattered porcelain. Egypt's sky so clear it hurts. You lie back near the edge of the deck, where you can barely hear the wine-fueled political debate going on behind you, something about which god has the best beard. Suddenly the ship rocks, not violently, just enough to spill a wine jar and nearly knock a cat into the water. People laugh, but you hear the helmsman mutter under his breath about the crocodile god Sobek being moody this week. That's your quirky tidbit. Some ships carried live crocodiles on board wrapped in linens and given offerings, hoping to appease Sobek and guarantee smooth travel. Did it work? Well, depends on how much meat you brought. As the night deepens, you drift downriver under moonlight temples glowing on distant hills. You think of all the people lined along the banks watching this traveling city pass like a dream they'll never touch. You wonder if Amenhotep really believes he's a god, or if he just tells himself that so he doesn't feel the weight of 1,000 hopes clinging to his silk robes. You shift on your cushion, staring at the black river beneath the boat, and think this isn't just a cruise. It's a moving empire, an illusion on water, and you're part of it now. Somewhere below deck, someone starts tuning a flute again. You're tempted to leap overboard. The river fades behind you, replaced by wind grit and the distant scream of something that might be a jackal, or just your stomach trying to digest last night's honey-roasted locusts. You're on land now, or rather sand. Lots of it. Rolling dunes, mirage-laced hills, and a sun so aggressive it feels personal. The pharaoh wants answers from the gods, and apparently the gods only whisper from the middle of nowhere. This trip, it's a royal desert pilgrimage to the Siwa oasis, an isolated spot so remote that even most camels look at it and go, maybe next time. But Pharaoh doesn't do maybe. He does divine revelations. So now you're trudging behind an elite caravan headed west into the Libyan desert, where the oracle of Amun is said to speak with the voice of fate, or gas. Hard to tell which sometimes. You squint against the wind. Up ahead, golden parasols bob over the heads of guards and nobles. The pharaoh in his gilded chariot isn't even pretending to walk. He's reclined beneath an embroidered canopy, fanned by 2 Nubian attendants and shaded by ostrich feathers taller than you. His sandals are literally sprinkled with lapis. And you've got 1 water flask and a sandal full of scorpions. This journey isn't for the faint of heart or lungs. The sand is finer than flour and stings like betrayal. You wrap your linen scarf tighter around your nose, half tempted to join the donkeys. At least they get breaks. Now here's your historical fact. Alexander the Great famously made this same journey to Siwa hundreds of years later to be declared the son of Amun. So So yes, even legendary conquerors wanted the same divine thumbs up the Egyptian kings were chasing. The oracle was that big of a deal. The ancient Yelp review probably read spooky, accurate, life-changing, bring your own camel. But this specific trip, it's likely modeled on the travels of Pharaoh Psamtik II, or maybe even earlier rulers like Seti the Rhine, who sent messengers to confirm their godly legitimacy when politics got testy. Because let's be clear, a pharaoh's god status wasn't just for ego. It was his insurance policy. No one overthrows a living god. Well, not successfully. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some fringe historians suggest the Siwa oracle site had underground vents that released hallucinogenic vapors, meaning all those divine voices. Maybe just dessert mushrooms and creative breathing. By the third day, your lips are cracked, your hair's full of sand, and your patience has been replaced by a sunburn so deep it probably has its own social security number. Yet the caravan presses on deeper into the silent furnace of Western Egypt. At night, the desert is a different beast, cold, howling, and dotted with campfires. The guards sleep in rotating shifts, while the priests chant soft protective spells in a circle of black stones. Somewhere nearby, a small shrine to Set the god of chaos is left a crumb of bread, just in case. The pharaoh doesn't like to take sides when out in Set's house. A young priest approaches you with a drink that smells like fermented dates and disappointment. He warns you not to whistle too many desert spirits mistake it for mockery. You don't sleep much, not with jackals howling and rumors of a sand demon that picks off stragglers. Of course, it's probably just another noble trying to sneak off with a concubine. Again. On the seventh morning, the air changes. It tastes wetter, heavier. A mirage becomes real, and the green burst of Siwa oasis appears like someone spilled emerald ink across a scroll of gold. Palm trees, date groves, pools of still water so clear you can see your poor sunburnt reflection and wonder if you'll ever feel your knees again. The caravan erupts in cheers, subtle ones of course. Nobody out-cheers the pharaoh. The temple itself isn't massive, but it radiates age. Sand-worn, obsidian-shadowed, and covered in glyphs, so old even the priests pretend to read them. Two ibises watch you from the shadows. The kind of stare that says, "You shouldn't be here." The pharaoh enters first, flanked by two high priests in panther skin robes. He disappears behind columns into the inner sanctum, where the god waits, or at least the mouth of the oracle who speaks for him. You stay outside where the desert breeze barely rustles the palm leaves. A nervous silence hovers, occasionally broken by whispers like, "Do you think he'll come out glowing again?" "Remember the last guy," said the god gave him a new name. Got eaten by a lion a week later. Historians still argue whether the oracle at Siwa truly had political power, or if it was just ceremonial pageantry dressed up in incense. Some even suggest that what was said inside those stone walls was prearranged, a power move designed to validate the pharaoh's next conquest, or marriage, or oddly specific tax increase. Inside, we'll never know exactly what Amenhotep hears. Maybe the voice of a moon promises victory. Maybe it says nothing. Maybe it tells him to ditch Tyre and become a potter in Thebes. But when he emerges, his eyes are different. Not glowing exactly. Just confident. Satisfied. The kind of look you get after a great speech, a risky bet that pays off, or hearing your god tell you, "Yes, you're special." He raises a hand. The crowd bows as one. Priests start to chant a new title, beloved of Amun, son of the Hidden One. You're not sure if it's fresh off the oracle's tongue or scribbled in advance. The next 2 days are restful. The caravan feasts on figs, flatbread, and goat cheese beside freshwater pools. The pharaoh bathes in a sacred spring while you awkwardly make eye contact with a falcon who might be Horus in disguise. And then just like that, you're on the move again. Back through the desert, but with lighter hearts. Everyone walks taller. Even the donkeys strut. It doesn't matter what the oracle really said. It matters that it was said, that the king heard it, that you all believe it at least enough to survive the return. You take one last look at Siwa vanishing behind heat haze and think for a place so silent, it changed everything. Sand gives way to stone now, and your steps echo off craggy cliffs as you follow the royal party into the ragged folds of the Sinai Peninsula. You've left the fertile banks of the Nile far behind, and the palm-shaded whispers of Siwa are just a memory baked into your sandals. Now the pharaoh is chasing something less divine, but somehow more sacred to the royal treasury turquoise. The sky here feels closer, heavier. Jagged mountains loom around you like the ribs of the earth itself, and somewhere up ahead, the stench of copper and charred rock tells you you're approaching the legendary mines of Serabit el-Qadim, where pharaohs sent expeditions not for spiritual clarity, but for bling. You're deep in mining territory now, where the stakes are gold-painted, but the labor's blood and sweat. Pharaoh Sneferu started the tradition, but it's Tuthmosis, our current desert-dusted travel host, who's here to make sure things are still productive. And by productive, we mean there's still enough turquoise to coat some temple columns and keep the palace jewelry collection scandalously large. The convoy's changed. Less fanfare, more grit. You spot scribes with scorched scrolls, guards with sun-peeled armor, and priests who keep glancing nervously at the rocks, like they're waiting for them to speak. Honestly, it wouldn't be the weirdest thing to happen this week. The Sinai is sacred and dangerous. The miners say the turquoise lies in the bones of the goddess Hathor, and if you chip too deep without permission, she'll take something back, usually a limb. The mountain pathways twist tighter, and the air smells of smelted metal and too many men living too close together. Dust clings to your skin. The heat now isn't wide like the desert, it's narrow, trapped in canyons. You feel like you're walking through a forge. Here's your historical fact. Serabit el-Qadim was one of the most important mining sites in ancient Egypt, and evidence shows that expeditions here could last months, even years. Pharaohs weren't always physically present, but when they were, it was a massive ordeal, like a royal audit of divine stones. And here's your quirky tidbit: these expeditions left graffiti. A lot of it. Workers, overseers, and priests carved their names, prayers, complaints, and sometimes full-on fan fiction into the walls of mining shrines. One inscription simply reads, "The God heard my voice." Another seems to say, "Get me out." You feel that one in your soul. Tuthmosis dismounts at the entrance to the mine. You follow ducking beneath a lintel that's seen centuries of prayers and pickaxes. Inside the stone walls sweat minerals. Lanterns flicker. In a side chamber, a statue of Hathor sits enshrined, her cow ears gentle, her eyes unblinking. Offerings lie at her feet, beads bread, even a single polished turquoise stone shaped like an eye. The ceremony begins. Priests chant. Miners kneel. Incense is burned, and an ox is sacrificed, probably the only one for 50 miles. It's all very sacred, until you catch one of the guards yawning, loudly. You step deeper into the mine where tunnels branch like veins. One miner gestures you over. He presses a chunk of rock into your hand and grins, showing turquoise dust in his teeth. You glance closer. Embedded in the stone, a gleaming vein of blue so bright, it looks unnatural. This is the stuff that lines sarcophagi, that halos statues, That gets pressed into the pharaoh's crown so he shines like the sun. It's worth more than gold, at least in the palace. Out here, it just gets you another day of backbreaking labor. Historians still argue whether these mines were truly divine centers or simply strategic economic hubs dressed up in religion. Did the pharaohs believe Hathor lived here? Or was it just a great excuse to demand more tribute, more ore, more glitter? You trail the royal inspection. Thutmose steps lightly across scaffolding, looking far too clean for someone in a mine. He smiles at the overseer, inspects a newly carved shrine relief, then mutters something to his scribe. You catch a few words, something about quota and divine patience. You're guessing somebody's about to get yelled at. In poetry. You pause at one of the wall carvings. It's old, pre-dynastic maybe. The lines are jagged but desperate, a man kneeling before a horned goddess, his arms outstretched palms full of something that looks suspiciously like nothing. Just air. The plea is eternal. Later that night, the pharaoh's camp is set among the cliffs. Fires crackle, soldiers relax. The smell of roasted meat and bitter herbs floats past. You find a seat on a warm rock and glance upward. The stars here are sharp, almost surgical. You swear they're closer in the Sinai. One of the miners joins you, crusted in turquoise dust. He speaks of a ghost, a blue woman who walks the tunnels, blessing or blinding, depending on her mood. She once kissed a man's forehead, he says, and when he woke, he could smell copper through walls. You nod because honestly, it's been that kind of trip. Later, the pharaoh performs a private rite beneath Hathor's shrine. He leaves an offering of lapis and honey, his voice low, uncertain. Maybe he's praying for more turquoise, or fewer enemies, or for the strange blue dreams to stop. Either way, you pretend not to listen, but you hear every word. The next morning, the convoy begins its return. The wagons are heavier now, crates of raw turquoise packed like treasure chests. Thutmose rides ahead, clearly pleased. His crown catches the light just right. It's almost enough to make you forget the blisters forming under your belt. You glance back once as the mines disappear into the haze of the morning sun. Somewhere in those tunnels, offerings are still smoldering. Gods are still listening. Or maybe not. The Sinai doesn't care either way. The drums start before dawn. Low, heavy, deliberate. The kind of rhythm that doesn't ask for your attention, it takes it. You're jolted awake on your rough linen mat, the dust from last night still clinging to your lips, and all around you, the royal camp is in motion. No perfume-scented breezes today, no golden barges. This is war prep. You're heading into Nubia, that vast sun-scorched land south of Egypt, that ancient pharaohs loved to invade, befriend, or colonize, depending on who's writing the history scroll. And today, Pharaoh Thutmose I isn't coming for trade beads or awkward cultural exchanges. He's coming with a vengeance. And way too many banners. You mount your place in the rear column of the royal entourage, wedged between two ox carts and a teenage spear carrier who hasn't stopped crying since breakfast. The royal war machine stretches for miles, archers in lines so straight they could cut papyrus chariot squadrons gleaming with fresh polished bronze. And behind it all, a massive portable shrine to Amun, hauled by 60 sweating men who look deeply resentful of spiritual symbolism. The pharaoh's chariot rides at the center axle, creaking over stone as his horses, blacker than night, nostrils flaring like war trumpets, kick up the desert dust. He stands tall, a god in gold. His war crown glitters. His face is unreadable. Somewhere beneath all that ceremonial armor, you suspect he's loving this. Here's your historical fact. Thutmose I did indeed launch a military campaign deep into Nubia, extending Egyptian control farther south than ever before. This wasn't a skirmish, it was a full military operation, complete with riverboats dragged overland and fortresses constructed along the Nile to keep control of the region. But this trip isn't just conquest, it's theater. Every camp setup is precise, every torch lit with ritual. Even the war drums follow astrological timing. Pharaoh doesn't just invade, he performs domination. Now here's your fringe tidbit. Some historians believe Thutmose ordered scribes to exaggerate the distance traveled during this campaign, claiming to have reached the end of the world. Which is ironic, considering the Nubians probably just saw him coming, rolled their eyes and sharpened their spears. You press forward into the rocky valleys and sandstone cliffs of Lower Nubia. The land here is stunning harsh, yes, but glorious. The river narrows, winding like a dark snake through golden ridges. You pass small villages, empty, burned, or just evacuated. Most people here already know the pattern. Egypt comes, fights, builds a temple, renames a few gods, and leaves behind a garrison that never learns the language. The air smells of smoke, not the sweet kind from incense, the bitter kind from cooked goats and scorched roofs. The army halts on the edge of a wide plain, its far side shrouded in morning mist. Scouts whisper of Nubian warriors gathering. You feel the mood shift, tighten. The soldiers get quieter. Chariot wheels are checked. Arrows are counted, then counted again. The pharaoh dismounts, walks to the center of the field, and raises a hand. No speech, no booming declarations, just a nod. And then the chariots move. What follows is chaos, of course. War always is, even when planned down to the hourglass grain. You hear screaming human and horse. Bronze shatters on shieldwood. The air is thick with dust and panic and the sour reek of blood. And through it all, the pharaoh rides like a storm god, bow-drawn cloak, snapping, shouting commands in a voice that could part rivers. You stay out of it. Mostly. Ducking behind a boulder, pretending to take notes for posterity while mentally calculating how fast you could run if things go wrong. They don't. Not this time. The battle ends by midday. Egyptian banners rise. Nubian warriors retreat, leaving behind shields, broken spears, and a trail of angry curses that you're pretty sure translate to, again Pharaoh surveys, the field dismounts, and orders a small obelisk to be erected. Just like that, from cart to ground in under an hour. He carves the date the gods' names and a neat little line about how Nubia was pacified with divine justice. Historians still argue whether Egypt's relationship with Nubia was purely imperialist or more complex. Some inscriptions suggest marriages, treaties, even shared deities. But standing here ankle-deep in war dust, it's hard to see anything other than conquest dressed up in ceremony. That night, a victory feast is held. Roasted gazelle, date wine, and songs that sound suspiciously rehearsed. The pharaoh raises his cup to Amun, to Egypt, and most importantly, to himself. And yet his eyes never quite settle. You catch him glancing south toward the land he hasn't reached yet. Toward Kush, toward deeper Nubia, where the gold mines glitter and the temples don't bow. He wants more. Later you walk the edges of the camp. Fires flicker, guards murmur. Somewhere a wounded soldier prays quietly to Hathor, asking for either healing or a swift trip to the field of reeds. You spot a scribe etching the day's events onto a portable stele. His writing is fast, fluid, polished, like he's done this before. You peek over his shoulder. Pharaoh Thutmose, beloved of Amun, conquered Nubia in a single divine breath. You raise an eyebrow. Divine breath felt more like 6 hours of screaming heat stroke and horse panic. But sure, that works too. He shrugs. History likes heroes. Before dawn, the camp breaks. Pharaoh is already in his chariot, face unreadable again. The drums begin anew. And so the army marches deeper south, not because they must, but because they can. Because when you're a god on earth, even the horizon looks like a challenge. You hear the giraffe before you see it. A low, bewildered bleat echoes across the dock, followed by the unmistakable sound of several very confused sailors arguing about how to tie a boat rope around a creature that's 15 feet tall and deeply uninterested in boat ropes. Welcome to the great voyage to Punt, or as it might also be known, Pharaoh Hatshepsut's big, beautiful, possibly fake trip to nowhere. This is no military march, no sand-choked death trek. This is a glorified trading expedition wrapped in enough divine PR to make a perfume ad look humble. Your current Pharaoh Hatshepsut isn't here to conquer. She's here to impress. And oh boy, does she. From your spot on the crowded quay at the Red Sea port of Mursa Gawasis, the scene is absurd. Royal ships are being prepped, huge ones, double the usual size, with sails stitched from imported linen and hulls of cedarwood sycamore, and what you hope isn't slave labor. Crews run in every direction. Crates are being loaded with tools, wine linen beads, and enough ceremonial incense to smother a volcano. And yes, a very annoyed giraffe, blinking slowly like it's questioning every life choice that led to this. Now for your historical fact, this expedition to Punt, sometime around 1470 BCE, was one of the most famously recorded in Egyptian history, etched in rich detail on the walls of Hatshepsut's mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. There you'll see images of ships, exotic animals, myrrh trees, and plump Puntite merchants with elaborate beards, wide hips, and surprisingly cooperative expressions. But here's your scholarly twist. We still don't know exactly where Punt was. Historians argue fiercely. Some point to the Horn of Africa, maybe Eritrea or Somalia. Others suggest Yemen. A few fringe scholars think it wasn't a real place at all, but a symbolic journey, an invented land of riches used to boost Hatshepsut's divine brand. Which leads to your quirky tidbit. Some researchers believe the Queen of Punt, depicted in the temple walls, was a caricature meant more to entertain or mythologize than document. She's drawn with exaggerated proportions and a giant backside, which might say more about Egyptian taste in humor than their accuracy in ethnography. But back to your boat. You're aboard the lead vessel now beside Hatshepsut's appointed commander, a sleek, no-nonsense man named Nesi. He has the slightly panicked aura of someone managing a diplomatic mission, a zoo, and a massive PR stunt all at once. The sails catch the morning wind. The Red Sea stretches before you, blue choppy, scattered with dolphins and ominous seabirds. The Pharaoh herself isn't on board. She's stayed in Thebes, where she's already carving victory inscriptions in advance. Confidence, absolutely. Delusion, maybe just a dash. The voyage is long, weeks, possibly months. You lose count after your 4th sunburn and your 5th fermented fish ration. The sailors chant hymns to Hapi and Bez, the little god of protection. You sleep beneath stars and dream of goats falling overboard, which may or may not have actually happened. Then one morning, land appears, greenish, humid, buzzing with insects large enough to rent property. You dock at a river's mouth, and there they are, the people of Punt. They're not surprised. In fact, they seem ready, which is weird considering they supposedly didn't know you were coming. They bring baskets of ebony panther skins, ivory baboons, incense, and gold. You bring bead necklaces, axes, and a truly unsettling amount of dried fish. The trade is smooth, maybe too smooth. A ceremony is held. offerings to their gods, dancing. A baboon steals a headdress. Everyone pretends it didn't happen. You notice something else: the Puntites have their own temple. Not Egyptian, their own. It's wooden, elevated on stilts, carved with unfamiliar symbols. Hatshepsut's propaganda will later claim that the gods of Punt welcomed the Egyptians like long-lost children. But standing here, you're not sure the gods said anything at all. You assist Nasi with cataloging the haul. The biggest prize, living myrrh trees, dug up, potted, and prepared for the return voyage. Hatshepsut wants them planted at her temple. She's not just importing goods, she's importing miracles. Before you leave, a Puntite elder hands you a bundle wrapped in leopard skin. Inside, a tiny statuette of a horned god, eyes painted with red ochre, mouth sealed with wax. For the sea, he says. You don't ask what that means. The return voyage is faster. The winds are with you. The giraffe survives, albeit sulkier than before. You arrive back in Egypt to cheering crowds and a surprisingly fresh batch of temple inscriptions that already declare the expedition a divine success. You're summoned to Deir el-Bahari, where Hatshepsut stands in her dual-gendered regalia, beard, crown, and all. She walks you through the reliefs. There she is, receiving tribute. There are the Puntites bowing. There's the giraffe. There's you. Maybe one figure has your nose. She turns to you and says, "We have brought the gods home." You nod. Historians still argue whether she ever truly went to Punt at all, whether this was a real expedition or a ritual reenactment, whether the journey was spiritual, symbolic, or simply state-sponsored theater. But you know this: you were there. You smelled the myrrh, swatted the mosquitoes, and helped anchor a ship carrying an incense tree. Even if Punt was a dream, it was a dream built with oars, sweat, and giraffe rope. And somewhere in your pack, wrapped in leopard skin, that wax-sealed statuette still murmurs in your sleep. The sky is bronze with dust, the kind that settles into your eyelashes and tastes faintly of salt and war. You're standing on a wide plain near the city of Kadesh, and around you, the largest chariot army the world has ever seen is being assembled like an overly dramatic board game. Horses stamp the ground. Shield-bearers bark orders. The scent of oiled leather sweat and rising panic clings to the morning air. Because today, you ride with Ramses II, the pharaoh who never met a monument he didn't want to carve his name on, and who thought diplomacy was mostly for people who couldn't aim a javelin. This is not a leisure trip. This is the Battle of Kadesh. And let's just say you didn't pack enough clean linen for what's about to happen. You glance over at Ramses, seated in his chariot of electrum, and wood drawn by two snorting stallions named Victory and Thebes and He Who Crushes Traitors. Not subtle, he's radiant in battle armor, his face perfectly bronzed, his hair curled and lacquered, and yes, he's wearing eyeliner. Thick, sharp, weaponized. Because if you're going to potentially die in international warfare, you should look like a god. Here's your historical fact. The Battle of Kadesh, circa 1274 BCE, was fought between Ramses II's Egyptian forces and the Hittite Empire, and it's often considered the largest chariot battle in history. The Egyptian records say Ramses won heroically. The Hittites say it was a draw. Modern historians, they mostly nod, squint, and say it was complicated. Here's your quirky tidbit. Ramses had his military scribes chisel victory propaganda into every available temple wall across Egypt, even when the truth was closer to miraculous escape. His version of the story was performed by temple singers and children's choirs for decades. Who needs facts when you have public relations? The problem is, the pharaoh rushed in. As you now know from very personal, sweaty experience, he split his forces into divisions named after gods, Amun-Ra-Ptah and Set, and rode ahead with only one of them. He thought the Hittites had fled. In reality, they were hiding behind the city, preparing to unleash a surprise attack, so bold it makes you consider faking an injury and walking home. The Hittite chariots descend like thunder, scattering Egyptian forces. You're suddenly in the middle of chaos. Horses screaming sand clouds, swirling arrows shrieking through the air like vengeful birds. You duck behind a broken wheel and try to avoid being trampled by history. Ramses, to his credit, does not flee. No, he rallies. With no backup in sight, he charges into the fray alone, just him, his divine war horses, and enough confidence to crush a rebellion. You can't hear his words over the roar, but you can see him yelling at the sky, possibly at the god Amun himself, and then cutting down 3 enemy chariots like he's auditioning for an action scroll. Later, when the rest of the Egyptian divisions finally arrive, late, dusty, and extremely apologetic, Ramses is standing over a pile of broken Hittite gear, his armor dented, his eyeliner still perfect. They hold the line. The Hittites retreat back into the city. No clear victory, no crushing defeat, just blood dust, and a lot of nervous scribes asking, what exactly should we write? Historians still argue whether Ramses truly turned the tide of battle by himself, or whether the sudden arrival of Egyptian reinforcements made the difference. Was it divine courage, luck? Or did Ramses just scream louder than everyone else? That evening, Ramses dictates his version of events. The cowardly Hittites ambushed us like snakes. I alone stood firm. Amun strengthened my arm. The enemies fell before me like straw in fire. You're pretty sure the snakes were metaphorical. You're less sure about the part where he claims all nations trembled at the sight of him. Back at camp, the scribes work by torchlight. Sculptors sketch chariot poses. Musicians are already composing hymns about Ramses's divine bravery. One of them tries rhyming Hittite with midnight. It does not go well. Meanwhile, Ramses receives envoys from the Hittites bearing gifts. He accepts them with a smile so sharp it could slice papyrus. Technically, it's a peace offering. Emotionally, it's 2 rival football teams politely shaking hands after a 0-0 tie. You ask one of the scribes quietly out of earshot what really happened today. He shrugs. He lived. That's all that matters. You walk the edge of the battlefield the next morning. Vultures wheel overhead. The broken remains of chariots litter the plain. A golden bracelet catches the light half buried in the sand. Someone must have died very suddenly to lose something that valuable. You pocket it without a word. A few days later, the army turns north, back toward Egypt. The trumpets sound, the banners rise, and Ramses rides out front again, just as radiant, just as confident. You watch him wondering what kind of man survives a surprise ambush, a near defeat, and a sandstorm, and then commissions 20 statues of himself in the exact pose he struck mid-battle. You sigh and tighten your sandals. The journey home will be long, but the story's already being written. And one thing's for sure, they'll all say he won. You're back in Thebes, and for once you're not on a boat or dodging spears. No one's bleeding, no sand in your ears, no giraffes being hoisted onto ships. Instead, you're standing at the threshold of something impossibly massive, the temple of Karnak's stone forest of gods, carved with millennia of whispered ambition. This is no mere building. This is a circuit of power, a sacred route you now travel with the pharaoh himself. No battles, no trading, just a divine public relations campaign with more incense than logic and more stairs than your calves are ready for. The Apet festival is in full swing and you're swept into its flood of ritual. Picture it, the Nile is high, the air thick with humidity and perfume. The king is being carried on a golden palanquin, shaded by fans made from peacock feathers. and his face holds the expression of someone who knows he's pretending to be a god, and is pretty good at it. The festival is essentially a temple-hopping tour, one where Amun-Ra himself is paraded in a sacred bark, from Karnak to Luxor, from divine home to divine birth chamber, symbolizing the rejuvenation of royal power. And you're tagging along for the full ride. Here's your historical fact. The Opet festival was one of the grandest religious processions in ancient Egypt, lasting up to 27 days during some rains. It fused theology, theater, and monarchy into one relentless show of divine legitimacy. Ordinary people lined the processional avenue, now known as the Avenue of Sphinxes, while only select clergy and elite scribes like you, lucky you got to walk the inner sanctum circuit. But here's your fringe tidbit. There's evidence that certain parts of the procession were strictly symbolic, with journeys between temples reenacted indoors using models, miniatures, and mirrors to simulate movement. So yes, sometimes the gods couldn't be bothered with traffic. Still, today's version is fully live, and you're in it. The procession begins with a rising chant from Karnak's first pylon drums, Sistrum's tambourines, and those deep-throated temple horns that sound like thunder stuck in molasses. Priests emerge in lines carrying statues, incense burners, and scrolls wrapped in lion skins. You inhale sharply as the sacred bark of Amun is revealed, golden boat-shaped and decorated with falcons, sun discs, and lotus petals carved so precisely they shimmer. It's heavy, ridiculously heavy. It takes 24 men to carry it, their shoulders raw and shiny with sweat. But no one dares complain. You don't groan under a god. The king follows, walking, not riding his bare feet, stepping in crushed myrrh petals. His crown is the tall white and red double crown of unified Egypt. His robes stiff with embroidery, and his eyes fixed ahead like he's watching time unravel. As you march through Karnak's hypostyle hall, those 134 towering columns that seem to scrape the sky, you're engulfed in a labyrinth of shadow and light. The sun barely penetrates here, filtered through stone. It smells like crushed herbs and old stone prayers. Every step is timed. Every chant has been practiced for months. You pass sacred pools where geese honk in disapproval, and through chapels where god statues blink behind veils of incense. Occasionally, a priest sprinkles water on the floor, and everyone pretends it's very symbolic and not just a cooling tactic. The processional way, lined with dozens of weathered sphinxes, leads you toward Luxor. The people outside cheer. Some throw flower petals. A small boy yells, "That's the guy from the war," and you're unsure whether he means the king or you. You make your way through the Temple of Luxor, smaller but richer, more focused. Here, the divine birth of the pharaoh is reenacted in a lavish play, where gods in masks act out cosmic drama. The king is conceived by Amun, born from a goddess, and declared divine by default. It's ancient myth and PR in one scroll-ready performance. A brief aside, you spot one actor playing Mut, the goddess mother, tripping slightly over her crocodile skin costume and recovering with the grace of someone who's done this 20 times. After the rites, the king disappears into the inner sanctuary for his secret ritual, no outsiders allowed. You wait outside, listening to the buzz of wasps and philosophy debates between two bored guards. One says you think the god actually talks to him. The other chews on lotus root and replies, "I think the god's voice sounds suspiciously like the high priest." Historians still argue about this very moment. Was the Opet festival a genuine communion between king and god, or was it a political spectacle? Some scholars suggest the entire ritual existed to reassure the elite and the public alike that yes, the Pharaoh still had divine approval, even if taxes were terrible and the river gods were moody. When the king emerges, he's radiant, refreshed, slightly glittery. He mounts the bark, now carried in reverse, back to Karnak, with new titles shouted from every corner. Son of Amun, Lord of the Two Lands, he who walks among stars. You're pretty sure the last one is new, but you nod anyway. That night, the procession ends in a flurry of fireworks, actual fire plus priests with quick hands, wine-soaked rituals, and maybe a few moments that no one talks about the next morning. The gods return to their shrines. The people return to their homes. The king returns to his throne. And you return to your modest bunk behind the scribe's quarters, ears still ringing with hymns and the unmistakable truth that power in Egypt doesn't just ride in chariots. It parades through temples wearing lotus crowns and silk sandals. You fall asleep to the echo of footsteps on ancient stone and the scent of incense still clinging to your clothes. You're lying on a cool limestone floor, heart thudding like a festival drum, and everything around you smells like flame lotus resin and something older. Not old like your uncle's sandals, ancient like forgotten worlds and secrets carved in obsidian. Congratulations. You've just been invited to one of the strangest trips a pharaoh could ever take, a trial run of the afterlife. No need to die first. That's optional. Tonight you join the living God in a ritual rehearsal of his death judgment and rebirth. Sounds fun, right? Well, keep your arms and dignity inside the boat at all times, because once this starts, you're not stepping off until sunrise, or until a priest in a falcon mask declares you eternally radiant. Here's your historical fact. Egyptian pharaohs performed simulated journeys into the underworld, especially during key festivals like the Sed festival or funerary rites of ancestors. These rituals were intensely symbolic, deeply theatrical, and involved full-scale reenactments of the pharaoh's soul navigating through the Duat, the Egyptian realm of the dead. Now here's your fringe tidbit. Some ancient scripts suggest these rituals involved altered states, hallucinogenic plants, sleep deprivation, and sensory deprivation chambers. In other words, spiritual escape rooms, but with real stakes and crocodile masks. You're in a special chamber beneath the Temple of Abydos. The air is dense. Flickering torchlight dances off gold-painted walls where gods stride in profile beside glyphs that look like they were written by someone halfway between genius and possessed. Pharaoh Seti lies at the center of the room, not dead, just extremely still. He wears a ceremonial linen shroud. Over his chest, a heavy scarab amulet. Beside him, offerings, bread, wine, incense, and what appears to be a roasted duck wearing eyeliner. A priest murmurs a spell. The duck remains impassive. The ritual begins. 4 priests, each dressed as one of Horus's sons, circle the king. Each represents a protective deity of the dead liver, lung, stomach, and intestines. You try not to wonder which one's responsible for your stomachache from that undercooked date loaf. Suddenly, the chamber goes dark. Total, complete liquid blackness. From somewhere behind you, a drum beats once, then again, then twice more in rhythm, thump, 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 thump. The first gate of the underworld opens. A massive door swings inward, revealing a corridor lit by flickering oil lamps and lined with statues of jackals and serpents. You walk, slowly, quietly. The path beneath you is sand-covered stone, and it's been deliberately tilted. Just enough to keep your footing unsure. Just enough to remind you this is no casual walk. You and the pharaoh proceed flanked by priests chanting names of the dead Unus Joser Akhenaten, awkward names meant to guide the king through the perils of the duat. A priest in full Anubis garb steps from the shadows. He holds out a feather in one hand and in the other, a model heart carved in red jasper. The weighing begins. The king kneels. You're told to stand still and remain silent. You try, mostly, until a bead of sweat trickles down your back and you sneeze so loudly the priest drops the feather. Everyone pretends it didn't happen, including the gods. The ritual moves on. You enter the field of reeds next to symbolic paradise. In this version, it's a room filled with palm fronds, small pools of scented water and golden wheat set up like miniature farms. You're handed a tiny sickle and told to tend to your ka. You nod sagely, pretending you have any idea what that means. Then comes the river. A bark, yes, another boat is rolled out on ceremonial wheels. Black inlaid with silver and shaped like a crescent moon. Pharaoh steps aboard. So do you, mostly because the priest behind you has a torch and no patience. The boat is sailed around the chamber in a slow spiral, while priests recite verses from the Amduat, the underworld guidebook. You hear phrases like "the serpent coils," "the fire breathes," "the king passes unharmed," and also "let the souls split, reunite, and become God once more." Not terrifying at all. Halfway through the voyage, an interruption. A figure leaps from behind a curtain, a priest playing Apophis chaos serpent of the underworld destroyer of light. He wears a mask longer than your arm, his costume made of twisted reeds and flickering red paint. He shrieks and lunges at the bark. Cue chaos. Bells ring. Priests scream in practiced panic. Pharaoh rises, raises his crook, and strikes the serpent actor with a blow that definitely connects more than it should. Apophis retreats. Everyone cheers. Somewhere, a scribe takes a note. His strike was strong, like Ra's sunbeam. You nearly jumped out of the boat. Historians still argue about these underworld rehearsals. Some call them elaborate religious theater necessary for maintaining Mayat, the cosmic order. Others believe they were deeply personal rites of transformation meant to psychologically and spiritually reset the king into a state of divine rebirth. Some fringe theories even claim the ritual took days with food and sleep forbidden, forcing the king into an altered, transcendent state by sheer exhaustion and repetition. You don't know if that's true, but watching Sadie's steady, glazed expression, you wouldn't be surprised. You reach the end of the journey. A door opens. The dawn chamber. Light floods in from a hidden shaft above. The effect is stunning. Sunlight hits the gold walls, illuminating a statue of Ra Harakti, as if the god himself is stepping into the room. The king stands. He's dressed now in a fresh white robe, his face painted with red ochre and gold. The music swells. The chant rises. One final declaration is shouted. The king is born anew. He is Ra upon the throne. He is Osiris in triumph. You don't clap because that would be weird, but you do exhale hard. The ritual ends. The actors retreat. The priests bow. You're left blinking in the morning light of Abydos, wondering how you just watched someone die, be judged, battle a serpent, and return glowing with barely a nap. The pharaoh walks past you smiling. Next time he says, "We do the real thing." You really hope he's joking. The salt air hits you like a slap, with perfume sharp, fresh, laced with seaweed, and the faintest tinge of blood. Welcome to the Pharaohs' Red Sea Spa Retreat, an opulent, peaceful, quiet little coastal getaway built between cliffs and coral-strewn coves. It smells divine. The water glitters. The fish look smug. The staff bows just a little too quickly. something is very wrong. You've arrived at what was meant to be a relaxing royal vacation, a weekend of warm stone massages and cold pomegranate wine beside turquoise tides. But instead of tranquility, you're picking up nervous glances, sudden silences, and a conspicuously large number of guards for what's supposed to be a low-key spiritual cleanse. And also, someone just turned up dead. But we'll get to that. You were summoned by Pharaoh Amenemhat III, one of the great builders of the Middle Kingdom, known for his reservoirs, his obsession with administrative order, and now apparently his preference for saltwater therapy. You were told this place was sacred, a healing complex near Ain Sukna, tucked into the eastern desert cliffs. Sacred springs, hidden shrines, alabaster tubs. Honestly, it sounded like a dream. Except, well, someone drowned in the sacred pool this morning. Which wouldn't be that weird if they weren't the high priest of Sobek, wearing his ceremonial crocodile medallion and last night's eyeliner. Here's your historical fact. Amenemhat III did indeed expand Egyptian control of the Red Sea coast, establishing ports and way stations to facilitate trade with Punt and the broader Horn of Africa. Ain Sokna became an important base not just for commerce, but for mining expeditions into the Sinai and quite possibly private royal excursions. And your quirky tidbit, several ancient clay tablets discovered at Ain Sukna, suggest a royal relaxation house once existed there, where pharaohs or nobles came not for ritual, but to escape ritual, to breathe, bathe, and maybe do a bit of casual poisoning in peace. Which brings us back to the floating priest. You're asked not to speak of it. Naturally, this makes you want to speak of nothing else. Everyone claims it was an accident. The priest fell in. Despite being stone sober in full regalia and an excellent swimmer. The pharaoh says nothing. His face, as always, is a mask of polished certainty. But he cancels his morning bath, and that says everything. The rest of the retreat continues as scheduled. Sort of. You're given a personal acolyte, young Twitchy, named Menka. He takes you through the day's itinerary, sand exfoliation, with sacred natron salts, lotus oil, scalp blessing, meditative sunset, watch with live harp accompaniment, optional sea oracle consultation, additional donation required, you go along with it. You even enjoy parts. The sunrise here is unreal peach gold over the Red Sea waves, humming like a lullaby from the gods. You sip cooled fig juice while a masseuse rubs sandalwood oil into your aching shoulders. And you almost forget the high priest, until you find the second body. This time it's one of the kitchen boys face down in a storage room behind the date cellar. There's blood. Not much. Just a trickle from the ear. No signs of struggle, no signs of panic, just silence. The head chef tells you he simply tripped on a papyrus roll. You look at the papyrus. It's pristine. You mention your concern to Menka. He hesitates, swallows hard, then leans in close. They say the god doesn't like being disturbed. You blink. Which god? He looks at you like you've just asked which sun the sky uses. Sobek, of course. This is his water. And there it is. The murmurs begin. Priests start walking in pairs. The sacred pools are drained. Offerings triple overnight. Someone sacrifices a goat on a coral outcrop and whispers, "Let it be enough." Historians still argue whether events like these were written off as coincidence or taken as divine punishment. In ancient Egypt, cause and effect often looped through the gods. Accidents weren't just accidents, they were portent signs, maybe even divine messages delivered with deadly clarity. But not everyone's buying the angry crocodile god explanation. You notice the pharaoh's steward, an old man with eyes like coal dust, meeting secretly with two scribes behind the herb garden. You listen, carefully. Snippets. He knew about the tribute ledger. I told you the wine was too strong. We'll need a replacement priest fast. You don't sleep that night. The stars seem too bright. The water too still. A breeze moves through the palm trees and sounds eerily like breath. The next morning, the pharaoh emerges wearing white, unmarked, fresh, radiant even. He addresses the small circle of staff and priests still lingering at the retreat. Sobek has been honored. Balance is restored. We will not speak of this again. No one speaks, not even Menka. That afternoon, a ritual is held, half funeral, half cleansing. You walk in a circle around the drained pool, scattering blue lotus petals, while chanting invocations to Sobek, Lord of the Nile, sharp-toothed judge guardian of still waters. You're handed a clay jar of salt to toss into the wind. Everyone pretends it means something. Maybe it does. The last thing you see before departure is the pharaoh himself kneeling beside the pool, whispering a final prayer into the empty water. Then he stands, brushes off his hands, smiles at you. Some trips, he says, are best forgotten. You nod. And when the sun dips behind the cliffs and your caravan pulls away from the quiet stone spa where two people mysteriously fell, you realize something important. Even the most luxurious journeys can turn dark. And in Egypt, sometimes the gods really do take attendance. You're trying not to stare, but it's hard not to. The pharaoh is wearing a beard and a dress. Well, not just any dress. It's woven linen dyed in festival red, belted with gold, and covered in floral motifs that honestly slap. The beard, too, is ceremonial, a curled artificial thing you suspect is glued on with tree sap and divine confidence. But the real twist, the entire court is applauding. It's the festival of the beautiful reunion, and you're marching through Thebes in the royal gender-bending parade where gods change shape. Men wear goddess masks, and pharaohs embrace their more fluid selves in public ritual. No shame, no questions, just perfume and pageantry and a lot of rhythmic chanting. Here's your historical fact. Egyptian festivals, especially those involving Amun and his consort Mut, often included theatrical elements of role reversal, gender blending, and divine embodiment. The gods themselves were not bound by mortal gender. Amun could take feminine forms, and Hathor sometimes appeared with masculine strength. So when a pharaoh like Hatshepsut, or even a traditionally macho ruler like Ramses, slips into goddess regalia for a parade, it's not scandal, it's sacred, your fringe tidbit. Some scholars believe that during festivals like the beautiful Feast of the Valley or the Feast of Mut, high officials and priests also participated in ritualized cross-dressing, especially when portraying goddesses in temple dramas. And no, they didn't do it. Halfway wigs, gowns, makeup, and full trance dancing were part of the deal. Think divine drag show, but with hieroglyphics. And you've been given a gold-threaded sash and told to carry the sacred fan of Hathor. It's heavy. It smells faintly of wine and rose oil, and you're pretty sure it's been stolen by at least 3 previous attendants. The parade begins at dusk. You emerge from Karnak with a procession of dancers, priests, musicians, and one terrifyingly in-character Set impersonator who hisses at toddlers. The pharaoh, now in full eye of Ra ensemble, rides in a golden litter surrounded by torchbearers and flanked by singers chanting verses like, "She who dances in the blood of chaos, she who wears both sword and sweetness, behold the beauty that protects Egypt." Every 10 steps, the litter pauses and the pharaoh descends to dance. Yes, dance. Gracefully, slowly, twisting through movements said to mimic the movements of stars. You're surprisingly impressed. The people cheer. They wave lotus stems. Some throw bread. A child offers a cat. The cat declines. You move toward Luxor, the temples glowing under thousands of oil lamps. Drums beat like a racing heart. The Nile glistens beside you, reflecting firelight and divine illusion. The crowd swells as locals join in. Some are drunk, some are weeping, some are both. And then come the goddess chants. One group dressed as Hathor devotees spins in a circle, wailing flutes and casting rose petals to the wind. A second group, young men wearing cow ear masks, start singing verses from a hymn to Sekhmet, goddess of rage and healing. The pharaoh joins, mouthing words, eyes wide, nearly in trance. You lean toward the scribe next to you. How much wine was in that offering again? He doesn't answer. He's crying. A lot. Historians still argue whether these processions were merely symbolic acts of state theater, or if the pharaohs and priests truly believed they were channeling divine forms during festival rites. Some even suggest these moments of gender transformation were seen as necessary spiritual balancing acts, harmonizing male and female energies before great decisions were made. All you know is the pharaoh just kissed a priestess, then blessed a bull, then cried into a bouquet of lilies. It's been a night. As you arrive at Luxor Temple, the final phase of the ritual begins. A hidden statue of the goddess Mut is unveiled. She is beautiful, fierce, and decorated in silver chains that jingle ominously. The pharaoh bows to her, kisses the ground, and then, still in full feminine form, announces his readiness to receive her judgment. Everyone holds their breath. The high priest of Mut approaches. He lifts a papyrus scroll, recites a long list of blessings, and concludes with, "The union is made. The balance is sealed." The protector returns in many forms. A roar of celebration follows. Fireworks, real ones, light the sky in green and crimson. Wine flows like a second Nile. Dancers collapse in heaps of laughter and perfume. A goat faints. You're not sure if from joy or from being hugged too hard by a particularly enthusiastic priestess. Later that night, long after the official procession ends, the city is still partying. You wander the side streets of Thebes, fan tucked under your arm, listening to flutes and drunk laughter echo between limestone walls. In a small shrine near the river, you see something strange. The pharaoh alone, still dressed in a soft linen gown, face no longer painted. Crown set aside, just sitting, watching the water. You don't approach, you just listen. He whispers a prayer to both Amun and Mut, to strength and softness, to the balance that allows Egypt to stand. And then quietly, he says, "Let me be who the people need. Let me be all things, even this." You walk away in silence, the sound of flutes fading behind you. Some trips take you to battlefields, others take you to hidden temples. But sometimes the wildest journey of all is the one a pharaoh takes, inside his own skin. You're awake before dawn, partly because the sand gnats won't stop biting your ankles, partly because today's field trip comes with a touch of class guilt and an unsettling amount of forced enthusiasm. Today, you're going somewhere the pharaoh never goes unless he needs a photo op. You're traveling behind the scenes into the work camps of Giza, and oh yes, it's time for a surprise inspection. The pharaoh wants to connect with the people. You're told this like it's a casual suggestion. But considering the entire royal barge convoy has detoured miles from its path, and 100 guards have been posted along the desert perimeter, casual isn't really the word. You arrive just as the sun crests the pyramids. The air is already thick with heat, and the smell of limestone, dust, copper tools, and sweat. This isn't the tourist-friendly postcard version of Giza. This is the real place. Raw, loud, alive with scraping, shouting hammers on stone, and the distant cry of someone who just dropped a brick on their foot. You're not alone. The pharaoh comes in a small palanquin flanked by elite guards veiled from the wind and still slightly damp from his early morning facial. You walk behind him adjusting your scroll bag, trying not to trip over a rope, as a team of workers drags a 10-ton block toward what will eventually become another divine tomb with excellent airflow. Here's your historical fact. Despite long-standing myths, the pyramids were not built by slaves, but by well-fed, often highly skilled laborers, seasonal workers, craftsmen, and stonecutters. Excavations have revealed bakery ovens, medical stations, and even tombs for overseers and workers with full honors. But here's your quirky tidbit. Ancient graffiti discovered inside the pyramids includes phrases like the drunkards of Menkaure and the friends of Khufu gang, suggesting work crews had team names, rivalries, and probably inside jokes. One wall scrawl may even translate to "Pharaoh still owes us beer." Back to your inspection. The pharaoh descends from his palanquin feet wrapped in silk sandals totally unsuitable for rocky terrain. He's flanked by scribes who note every word he says, even when he just mumbles about the color of the limestone. He stops in front of a group of workers hauling timber sleds and offers one of them a piece of fruit. The man bows, says thank you, and immediately tries to hide his shock. This is the first time he's seen a royal face in person, and it's wearing so much eyeliner, it's a miracle it doesn't smudge in the wind. "Tell me," the pharaoh asks with perfect detachment, "are you proud to serve the eternal kingdom?" The man opens his mouth. No sound comes out. A foreman steps in to nod enthusiastically and says, "Of course, divine one. Every block laid in your honor is a poem of stone." The pharaoh seems pleased. You feel weird. The deeper you walk into the complex, the more you realize this isn't just a construction site, it's a city. There are bakeries pumping out flatbread by the basket. Breweries bubble with sour beer. Healers apply lotus paste to bruises and write up spells for twisted ankles. At one corner, you spot a scribe meticulously recording food rations for 300 men. His scroll has a faint doodle of a cat wearing a pharaoh's crown. You stop at a worker's barrack, clean, if cramped. Mats on the floor. Carved tokens of the god Ptah hanging by the entrance. Someone left a bowl of garlic cloves for protection. And yes, in the central square, there's a tiny shrine where laborers offer prayers to their ancestors and to the pharaoh just in case. The pharaoh pauses there, placing a small gold amulet in the offering bowl. You can't help but notice the irony: the man who owns the world leaving gifts for those who carve his name into eternity. Historians still argue whether these visits were real acts of care or performative politics. Did pharaohs truly check in on their workers? Or was this an elaborate show to maintain the illusion of benevolence? Your own notes are split. On one hand, the pharaoh says all the right things. On the other, he refuses to eat the communal bread, claiming it smells too pedestrian. Things go south when someone calls out loudly from the shade of a column in progress. Why does the god need so many tombs? If he's not planning to die twice, the area freezes. Every hammer stops mid-swing. Someone drops a chisel. The guards close in like sandhawks. But the pharaoh, after a long silence, laughs. Just once. A dry, amused chuckle. Then he says, "Perhaps one is for my body and the other for my ego." Everyone relaxes. The guards back off. The comment is recorded, possibly for future quote walls. As the sun reaches its peak, the pharaoh returns to his palanquin. He looks around once more, raises a hand in a blessing, and is carried away, trailing dust and incense. The workers bow. A few curse. One man starts singing a dirty song about the weight of royal stones and the foolishness of divine knees. You head back to the rear gate of the camp. Before you leave, a young stonecutter hands you something, a tiny carved figure of the pharaoh, but with a tiny hammer in his hands and a broken crown. A private joke, or maybe a warning. You smile. Thank him. Hide the figure in your bag. Because while the pharaoh's trip to Giza ends here, the stones remember everything, even the jokes. The sun blazes high above Thebes, and yet somehow the crowd lining the temple forecourt isn't shielding their eyes. They're looking up, waiting, murmuring, holding their breath, and then you hear it. A faint click followed by a shuddering whoosh and a collective gasp as the shadow of the great obelisk trembles, then glows. No, not glows. Shines, like fire caught in glass. Like the sun has leapt from the sky and stabbed into stone. You're witnessing one of the oldest illusions in history, the pharaoh flying into the heavens without ever leaving the ground. Welcome to the temple festival of Ra-Horakhti, where Egypt's sacred engineers and their divinely arrogant pharaoh stage a miraculous ascent into the sky, complete with pulleys, mirrors, smoke, and a death-defying platform that swings way too much for your comfort. Here's your historical fact. Sun temples and obelisks, especially those built during the 5th dynasty, were architectural expressions of the pharaoh's divine connection to Ra, the sun god. Obelisks weren't just decorative, they were solar lighthouses thought to pierce the heavens and channel cosmic power into the earth. But here's your fringe tidbit. Some temples were equipped with hidden chambers, light wells, and polished copper reflectors used to create dazzling, seemingly impossible light effects during ceremonies. Add a dash of stagecraft, and you've got what might be the world's first magic show starring your local god king. And today the star performer is Thutmose IV, standing atop a specially built scaffold near the base of his freshly carved obelisk. He's wearing a white linen robe stitched with gold thread, and on his head, the Atef crown, a tower of feathers, discs, and ceremonial risk. You're watching from the North Gallery, scribes clustered around you, taking notes, while nervously eyeing the ropes that hold the pharaoh's platform aloft. Priests chant, incense curls upward. Somewhere a harpist is playing a tune that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby repurposed for divine illusion. The crowd chants, he rises, Ra's fire lifts him. Then, with a creak of ancient wood and a gust of wind perfectly timed or perhaps summoned, the platform begins to ascend. Slowly, smoothly, suspiciously smoothly. You glance down and spot a crew of strong-armed priests beneath the platform pulling in synchronized motion. It's a pulley system disguised behind decorative panels carved with hieroglyphs. The priests have painted their arms gold so they'll look like living sun rays when glimpsed through the rising smoke. Clever. And then the mirrors kick in. Polished copper plates set on stands around the obelisk's base catch the sunlight and bounce it deliberately onto the pharaoh's robes. He flares like a comet, bright and blinding. The crowd falls to its knees. Someone faints. A child cries. You have to squint. Thutmose lifts his arms. I am the sun. I am the risen light. I burn the enemies of order. I shine with undying flame. He's clearly rehearsed this. You catch the glint of a cue scroll tucked into the corner of the platform. The obelisk, meanwhile, is doing its job, angled just enough to reflect sunlight upward, bathing the platform in divine brilliance. The effect is, well, spectacular. If you didn't know the trick, you'd believe it too. Historians still argue whether these ascension rites were purely symbolic, or whether people truly believed their king could rise into the sky, touch the gods, and descend filled with immortal wisdom. But standing here, it doesn't really matter. Belief doesn't always need wings. At the ceremony's peak, the pharaoh vanishes behind a curtain of smoke, tossed from braziers hidden in nearby alcoves. He's lowered behind the cover of incense, whisked off the platform, and replaced by a glowing sun disk mounted to the top of the scaffold. You pretend to be amazed. You're pretty sure even the most skeptical priest is. The crowd erupts. Cheers, chants, flower petals. Someone throws a basket of lotus stems and accidentally hits a guard in the face. The guard doesn't flinch. That's professionalism. And then from the shadowed temple gates, the pharaoh emerges again, feet on the ground, robes, pristine eyes glowing possibly from stress. He raises a hand in blessing. I have touched the light of Ra. I return with his fire in my blood. Egypt endures. No one dares question how he got down so fast. That's not the point. He's been reborn not as a god now, but as one who walks in step with the gods. The procession back to the palace is wild. Musicians play every instrument they own. A scribe reads the speech you just heard, except now it includes a line about hovering above the temple like a heron in full glory. That part definitely didn't happen. You pull aside one of the engineers, the man who designed the platform. He's sweaty, soot-streaked, and looks like he hasn't blinked in an hour. Ever dropped one, you ask? He grins. Once. But we said the god was angry. Got a week off. That night you lie awake in your chamber, still seeing the afterimage of sunlight on white linen, still smelling burning resin. The illusion worked. Not because it was flawless, but because everyone wanted to believe it. That's the real magic of Egypt. The pharaoh doesn't need wings. He just needs a good angle, a polished mirror, and a crowd willing to close its eyes and see. There's a crocodile watching you from the reeds. Its amber eyes barely crest the waterline, motionless, unblinking, as the oars slice quietly through the river. You're heading into the marshlands of Philae, a sacred cluster of islands in the Nile's southern bends, where temples rise out of the mist, like hallucinations, and even the birds seem to whisper ancient secrets. You've been summoned here for something rare, private, esoteric. The pharaoh is taking a sabbatical, they say, but not the kind where you sit under palm trees and dictate scrolls about harvest quotas. No, this trip is for visions. And you've heard rumors of lotus-drugged trances, secret rites on moonlit islets, and priests who wear crocodile skins, not just as costumes, but as second skins. So naturally, you packed light. You step off the boat into thigh-high marsh grass, your sandals already soaked, your tunic clinging to your knees. The pharaoh has arrived the day before, with only a handful of attendants, some temple musicians, and a suspicious number of herbalists. You're met by a priestess of Isis, face veiled, hands dyed with henna. She doesn't speak, just leads you across the slick stone causeway to the temple of Philae, where the goddesses are said to never sleep. Here's your historical fact. Philae was a major cult center for Isis, especially during the later dynasties and Ptolemaic era, but it had sacred importance for centuries before. The temples were isolated, accessible only by boat, and were often used for ceremonies requiring privacy or altered states of consciousness. And your quirky tidbit: certain rituals at Philae involved floating the pharaoh or his effigy on lotus rafts into the moonlit lake to let the gods read his soul. The pharaoh wouldn't speak. He would float, sometimes for hours, sometimes longer. You're led to a narrow chamber carved into the stone where lotus garlands hang from the ceiling, and a sickly sweet smell curls through the air. On a low bed lies the pharaoh, breathing eyes, closed body painted with silver pigment. You blink. Is he okay? The priestess doesn't answer. She offers you a bowl, lotus wine. You sip. The edges of the room start to breathe. Everything feels slower, softer. Like the gods have wrapped the walls in cloth and tucked your senses into sleep mode. You lie back. The stone feels warm. A chant begins. Dozens of low harmonic voices rising and falling like waves. Incense thickens. The pharaoh stirs. You rise, at least your body does. Your mind is drifting elsewhere, following the music across stone over water toward the tiny island shrine of Osiris, just out of sight beyond the reeds. You're in a boat now. Not one you remember boarding. It's shallow papyrus wrapped, lit by bioluminescent fireflies that hover like living glyphs. Across from you sits the pharaoh, awake, but not looking at you. Eyes fixed on the horizon, breathing slowly, clutching something in his lap, an ibis feather soaked in wine. You float in silence. Around you, the water glows faintly blue. Some priests believe this part of the river is touched by the afterlife, that the Nile here touches the waters of Nun, the primordial abyss from which all creation sprang. You're inclined to believe them. The pharaoh speaks, slowly. She came to me last night. Isis, she had the face of my mother and the voice of a storm. You nod, as one does when hallucinating next to divine royalty. She said the war will come soon, that I must wear the vulture crown and leave the lion mask behind. Another pause. Or was it the other way? He blinks, lifts the feather, lets it drift into the river. The boat keeps floating. You pass under a stone arch barely visible, and suddenly the sky explodes into stars. Thousands of them. You're not sure if it's night or something deeper. The constellations above begin to move, shift, align into shapes you've only seen in star maps and temple ceilings. The falcon, the serpent, the scarab, the boat of Ra. You're not just watching them, you're under them. The pharaoh closes his eyes and whispers a name. You don't recognize it. You don't think it's human. Then the boat stops. You've arrived at the islet. A platform of wet stone surrounded by reeds and silence. The priestess is here again, standing on water, or maybe a submerged dock. She lifts a lantern made of shell and flame. The pharaoh steps out. You follow. Another ritual begins. Chants. Anointing with oils that smell like metal and myrrh. The pharaoh walks in slow circles. In one hand, a knife. In the other, a lotus stem. He recites the names of his ancestors, everyone you've studied, everyone you've memorized for palace exams. I am Menes. I am Senwosret. I am Akhenaten, forgotten, but not undone. I am born in the mouth of Ra. He kneels. The priestess places a crocodile skull in front of him. He kisses it. You don't ask. Historians still debate whether these island sabbaticals were purely meditative retreats or disguised initiation rituals into mystery cults, some connected to Isis, others to older, stranger deities that no longer have names. One theory, mostly ignored, claims the pharaoh used these trips to channel prophecies through induced dreams, then returned to court with divine revelations that were suspiciously convenient. You're returned to your boat without memory of how you got there. The next morning, the pharaoh appears in the temple courtyard, eyes calm, voice steady, and declares, "The gods have spoken. We must build a new shrine, here, on the water." No one questions it. No one dares. The island temple you visited that night, never mentioned again. You check the maps. It doesn't exist. But you remember the stars and the way the crocodile watched you. Some trips don't end. They stay lodged in your bones, coiling like mist around memory. You're standing in the doorway of a goat barn. It smells like wet straw, boiled reeds, and something that might be cooked lizard. The wind outside kicks up dust so dry it peels the inside of your throat. You're not on a royal procession. You're not on a vision quest. You're in exile, and not even the glamorous kind, with velvet cushions and dramatic parting speeches. This is Pharaoh in hiding mode, and things have gone very, very sideways. You're with Simon, once heir apparent to the throne, now chewing on barley porridge out of a cracked bowl and pretending not to hear the villagers muttering about the cursed royal guest. The pharaoh's cousin led a revolt, the palace turned on itself, and before anyone could say dynastic chaos, you were smuggled into the desert wearing peasant robes and a look of betrayal. Here's your historical fact. Pharaohs were sometimes exiled, especially during unstable periods like the intermediate periods or palace coups. Kings fell, princes vanished. Former rulers ended up in far-off towns under assumed identities, sometimes even joining religious cults, just to stay off the radar. And your quirky tidbit, at least one ancient letter from the Amarna archive, describes a royal figure surviving in exile by posing as a temple gardener, complete with references to tending lotus ponds in silence and offering figs with humility. Humble, desperate, possibly allergic to figs. Siaman. He's not exactly adjusting well. His beard is patchy, his sandals don't match, and he still insists on being addressed as his divine shadow, even when asking for more lentils. You've been here 2 weeks. The village is small, tucked into a rocky cleft, near the edge of the eastern desert. There's one well, 2 goats. 4 people you're pretty sure are spying for someone. Your bed is a woven mat placed between a drying rack and a very judgmental cat. The former pharaoh, or technically not dead current pharaoh depending on who you ask, spends his days pacing a dried-out irrigation channel, reciting speeches to imaginary crowds. Sometimes he practices ceremonial poses in the goat pen. The goats remain unmoved. You try to keep a low profile, but then someone recognizes him. It happens in the market. You're trading a copper bracelet for onions when a traveling merchant from Thebes does a double take, drops a crate of figs, and says far too loudly, "Is that no?" No can't be. He's supposed to be dead. You exchange glances with Siamun. You both run. Back at the village, you pack fast scrolls, amulets, salted fish. Siamun insists on bringing a small ceremonial stool for throne continuity. You flee into the desert that night, guided by stars, an old map carved onto a cattle bone, and the constant whisper of, "I told you we should have built that moat." By the 3rd day, the silence becomes heavy. Too heavy. You realize you're being followed. Bandits, assassins, loyalists of the new pharaoh who's taken the palace, you don't know. But you do know someone left a jackal tooth in your sleeping mat as a message. Siaman doesn't flinch. Let them come. I am still Horus. Even stripped of a crown, I am the falcon. You nod, but maybe walk faster. Eventually, you arrive at a hidden shrine cut into the cliffs, half swallowed by sand. Here, Siamun collapses onto the altar stone and declares he will reconnect with the ancestors. You light a torch. Inside the shrine, you find hieroglyphs from the Old Kingdom, crude offerings of copper, and the faded image of a pharaoh whose name has been scratched out. Charming. Siamun begins a ritual. He chants, offers the last of your pomegranate wine, and dons a falcon mask made from palm bark. You swear you hear a voice, female, cold and amused, answer him in the wind. The next morning, he wakes different. His eyes are focused. His voice is calm. He doesn't ask for lentils. He looks at you and says, "It's time to take back the throne." You want to remind him that you have no army, no allies. and the only animal you control is a goat named Pebble who bites strangers. But you say nothing. You travel by night now, using old water routes, bribing priests with incense bundles and rare ink. Messages are sent. One of Siamun's old generals responds, then another. A third sends you a ceramic doll that explodes into red dust when broken. You assume that's a yes. Historians still debate the records of certain phantom pharaohs who disappear from official lists, only to reappear briefly in graffiti shrine carvings or damaged steles with phrases like, "He returned from nothingness," or "The hidden one rose in fire." Some believe these are metaphors. Others whisper that these were real exiles, lost kings who clawed back power with teeth and curses. By the time you reach the city gates, the rebellion has already begun. People gather. Whispers spread. The true one has returned. The current ruler is busy preparing a feast when he hears the news and promptly faints into a basket of melons. Siamun walks through the gates without a blade drawn. His falcon mask is gone. His sandals match. He steps onto the palace steps, raises his hands. I return not for vengeance, but for restoration. Let the shadows end, and the people cheer. You stare at him covered in dust, goat hair clinging to your tunic, and wonder how many more trips like this he has in him. That night after the coronation redux, you sit together in the old scribe's hall. He hands you a scroll. "Write it," he says. "But not the exile, just the return." You smile and write something very different. He walked the desert. He dreamed with the dead. He returned with fire in his name and lizards in his soup. Some stories deserve the truth, even the ones that start in a goat barn. The air tastes of ash before you see it. You're standing on the deck of a ship off the coast of the Aegean, watching the sky bloom in unholy orange as smoke pours from a mountain that seems to be eating itself alive. The sailors aren't chanting prayers anymore. They're screaming them. Even the pharaoh looks pale, and he once stood unfazed while someone juggled cobras for entertainment. You weren't planning to witness a volcanic apocalypse, but apparently nature doesn't check royal itineraries. This trip started as something delightful, a diplomatic voyage to the Minoan court. Lovely people, inventive hairstyles, excellent olives. The pharaoh Amenhotep III had come to check in on trade partners, collect exotic gifts, and possibly outglam the local king with an entourage that included 3 harpists, 1 leopard, and an architect who only speaks in riddles. But now you're just trying not to inhale powdered doom. Here's your historical fact. The eruption of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BCE, was one of the most massive volcanic events in human history. Its blast likely devastated the Minoan civilization, disrupted regional trade, and may even have inspired later myths of sinking cities, yes, even Atlantis. Your quirky tidbit. Some Egyptian records show abrupt climate shifts and crop failures around this time, including references to the sun being veiled for days and the river no longer remembering the flood. While no official papyrus reads, "A volcano ruined my trip," it's entirely possible that pharaohs or their envoys were present during or shortly after the disaster. Back to your boat. The sky is raining ash like sick snow. The sea has turned black. Flocks of birds fly in frantic spirals as if trying to escape a god's tantrum. You clutch the mast as the wind shifts direction, hot, sulfurous, and thick enough to sting your eyes. Amenhotep stands near the bow arms, folded, staring at the horizon, like he can command it to behave. His linen robes are singed on one edge, and he hasn't blinked in a while. One of the priests vomits quietly over the rail. "What god is this?" someone mutters. The navigator answers, "Not ours." The captain shouts an order hard to starboard. You shift course, trying to sail around the thickest part of the ash cloud, but the island behind you is visibly crumbling. Whole sections of cliff drop into the sea, sending up waves that rock the ship like a child's toy. And still the sky glows. You pass floating debris, a burned-out fishing boat, a scorched olive tree, a painted vase bobbing silently. Then you see it. A wave, taller than anything you've ever imagined. Not a normal Nile wave. This one has layers, white-capped foaming folding in on itself like a god twisting his bedsheets in a fit of rage. The sailors scream. You hold tight to a rope and pray to every deity on your internal registry. The wave doesn't hit you directly. It breaks against a nearby cliff first, but the backlash slams into your ship, snapping one mast and sending the harpist overboard. Don't worry, he floats. Barely. He's still holding his harp. The pharaoh does not panic. He orders the priests to chant louder. It kind of works. The storm rages for hours, but your ship holds. As dawn breaks, the sun claws through the haze, revealing a horizon choked in smoke and foam. Thera is gone. Not completely, but it might as well be. What remains is a broken, blackened crescent still smoldering, surrounded by floating ruin. Historians still argue whether this eruption directly affected Egypt. Some say the fallout contributed to the eventual decline of the Minoans and the shift in Mediterranean power dynamics. Others believe it's part of the dark years when Egyptian records go quiet, as if no one had the energy or nerve to write down what they saw. You glance at Amenhotep. His face is unreadable, his eyes fixed on the ruins. "The gods are fighting," he says softly. Then he looks at you. "Make sure we don't become the next offering." The return voyage is tense. The winds are strange. The sea tastes metallic. Every sunset now looks slightly wrong. By the time you dock back at the Red Sea port, no one speaks above a whisper. The pharaoh issues new orders. A temple to Amun shall be built near the shore. Offerings to the sea gods shall be increased. And absolutely no one is allowed to say the word eruption in court again. You suspect the volcano burned more than islands. It burned certainty, the illusion that Pharaoh controls all. Because that night, as Amenhotep retreats to his chamber, you overhear him whisper to his scribe, "What if it happens here, you don't sleep well, because you've seen what it looks like when the gods speak, and you're not sure Egypt is ready to listen." The camel caravan moves like a hungover centipede, slow lurching and making more noise than seems physically necessary. You're riding second from last behind a chest of carved ivory and directly in front of a young bride who keeps asking in various tones of increasing panic, "Are we there yet? Welcome to Egypt's Royal Marriage Delivery Service, also known as Send Daughter Receive Alliance." You are on a royal road now, winding from Thebes through desert oasis and heartbreak all the way to a distant foreign court, where this perfectly dressed, deeply terrified noblewoman will be handed over to a king she's never met. She's not technically a pharaoh yet, but she might be the mother of one, or the political glue that prevents a war, or if things go sideways, a pawn buried under some diplomatic rug for a generation or two. You reach a dusty milestone that reads quite literally 320 miles to love, power, or doom. Here's your historical fact. Egyptian pharaohs often married foreign princesses as part of diplomacy, but rarely gave Egyptian royal women in return. Letters from the Amarna archive reveal very polite refusals to requests from Babylonian and Hittite kings, asking for Egyptian princesses. Pharaohs weren't in the habit of sharing their bloodline, but when they did send noblewomen, it was a spectacle: dowries, chariots, guards, and all the gifts you can pile onto 20 camels. Your quirky tidbit, one foreign bride sent to Egypt reportedly brought her own portable temple, including statues of her gods, over 100 jars of scented oil, and at least 3 trained monkeys. The customs officer probably just gave up. Your current bride, Lady Bakatmut, is only 15, sharp as obsidian and about as flexible. She's wearing a cobalt blue veil and carries a dagger beneath her silk sash. For ceremonial protection, she says sweetly. You believe her about 60%. The procession includes 16 servants, 4 musicians who haven't stopped playing since breakfast, 7 guards who definitely didn't sign up for this much perfume, a pet greyhound named Lotus, and 1 royal envoy that's you trying to keep this entire alliance on legs from collapsing in the heat. Each night, you set up camp near wells and way stations, some marked with old stelae noting previous royal weddings. You read one that says, "Here passed the daughter of peace." She cried, then she sang. Bakatmut doesn't sing, she asks questions, mostly about the groom. A king of Kadesh, supposedly noble-wise and interested in long-term alliances. Do you think he smells like civet or old scrolls? Will I get a wing of the palace? What if I fall in love with someone on the way and we fake my death? You tell her the truth. He's probably got a beard and opinions. The desert stretches on. You pass traders, mercenaries, nomads, and one suspiciously chatty falconer who keeps trying to offer a hawk as a wedding gift. You politely decline. Bakatmut does not. Now you have a hawk named Whisper riding on a silk pillow. Somewhere near the Wadi Hamamat, you meet a small caravan heading south, carrying a foreign noblewoman from Kadesh. Her veil is torn, her eyes blank. She rides in silence. No one says anything, but everyone gets quieter after that. By week 3, things unravel. One of the guards is caught flirting with a servant girl. Bakatmut stabs his sandal. The musicians go on strike until they're fed something other than salted locust paste. The hawk refuses to fly, and the ivory chest somehow vanishes during a sandstorm. You find it half buried in a dune the next morning with only the soap gone. Priorities. Historians still debate how often these diplomatic brides were willing participants versus heavily scented bargaining chips. Some suggest the noblewomen had significant power at court advisors, mediators, even mothers to future rulers. Others believe they became little more than decorative hostages with fabulous wardrobes. One theory, notably unpopular among official scribes, claims that some royal brides never made it to their destination, opting instead to disappear mid-journey, helped by sympathetic guards or hired desert tribes. You keep a close eye on Bakatmut, just in case. When you finally reach the city of Kadesh, it's big, loud, and very, very humid. Trumpets sound, drums beat. A welcoming delegation in full regalia awaits you, including an older man with a very large beard and a very suspicious smile. "Welcome," he says. "May your presence here be as fruitful as a fig orchard in the flood." Bakatmut replies, "We'll see." The handover takes place in a sun-drenched courtyard. Gifts are exchanged. A stone tablet is signed. The hawk is presented. The bride steps forward. The king offers his hand. She takes it. But not before slipping her dagger into your belt. Quiet. Discreet. Just in case. The banquet that follows is excessive roasted duck dates stuffed with almond paste, gold leaf wine, and a performance involving trained panthers that clearly weren't in rehearsal mood. The king thanks you, sends you home with gifts. But as you leave, you glance back at Bakatmut seated on a cushion of lapis, silk face, serene posture, perfect. She meets your gaze, winks, then returns to sipping her pomegranate nectar like she's been doing this forever. On the way home, you find the following carved into your travel chest. Tell the next girl to bring her own hawk. Be noted. Some pharaohs ride into battle, some into visions, but others they ride into marriage. And sometimes that's the trickiest trip of all. The road ahead is ancient, older than the pyramids, older than the gods who were here before the current ones moved in. You're walking through Canaan, somewhere near what future cartographers might call Jerusalem, though no one's agreed on the name yet. Some call it Jerusalem, others Rishalamum. You just call it tents. Because the pharaoh may have taken a detour, one that never shows up in official scrolls, but lingers in ruins, rumors, and diplomatic side-eye from everyone you pass. You're not supposed to be here, and yet here you are. Akhenaten, the heretic king, the monotheist, the divine minimalist, is walking ahead of you in plain linen robes and no crown, his face half-shadowed under a linen hood. He's come in secret, though it's hard to miss the 8-bodyguard squad, the ceremonial chest of Aten hymns strapped to a donkey, and the extremely nervous scribe trying to look inconspicuous while carrying 300 tablets of state correspondence. Why is Akhenaten here? Officially, he's checking in on Egyptian outposts. Unofficially, he's trying to preach the light of Aten to foreign cities that didn't ask for it. And Jerusalem, it's one of them. Here's your historical fact. Letters from the Amarna archive confirm that Egypt had active correspondence with Canaanite rulers, including the kings of Jerusalem, Megiddo, and Gezer. These vassal lords sent desperate pleas for help, tribute, and sometimes apologies wrapped in flattery. Akhenaten often ignored them or responded with rants about proper sun worship. Your quirky tidbit, one Amarna letter, EA 287, comes from the mayor of Jerusalem, Abdi Heba, who complains that his enemies are rising, his allies are useless, and Egypt is doing nothing. In return, he may have received some beads and a strongly worded poem about the sun. Today, you're walking in silence. The hills are olive-covered. The wind carries dust and pollen. Distant bells toll not Egyptian, but local. You pass farmers who bow uncertainly, not recognizing Akhenaten's face, but sensing importance. A child offers him grapes. He smiles. You arrive at a hilltop shrine, a Canaanite place of worship, all rough stones and wooden altars. No temple of Aten here. No smooth columns or blinding light. Just old gods. Local gods. Forgotten gods. Akhenaten doesn't flinch. He steps onto the altar and lifts his arms. There is one light, he says softly. One warmth, one giver. The priests murmur. They don't understand the words, or maybe they do and just don't want to. A few cross their arms. One spits. You try to retreat. Akhenaten steps forward. Your gods are shadows cast by stone. Mine is the stone warmed by light. The air grows still. The Canaanite priest, tall, bearded, probably unimpressed by monotheistic guest speakers, raises an eyebrow. Then tell your son to save us from the raiders. A beat, or perhaps send grain. Akhenaten doesn't respond. Not directly. He places a gold disc on the altar, a sunburst amulet etched with rays touching every corner. Then he says, "Let your kings kneel and there will be no more raiders." It doesn't go over well. The scribes are writing furiously. One of the guards inches his hand toward his dagger. You whisper to the donkey to stay calm. Historians still argue whether Akhenaten ever left Egypt during his reign. There's no official record of him stepping foot in Canaan, but there are broken boundary stelae, damaged inscriptions, and awkward gaps in temple logs during the later years of his rule. Some suggest he traveled in disguise. Others think he sent envoys dressed like him. A few believe he went everywhere preaching Aten like a traveling sun salesman. The Canaanite priests don't throw stones, they don't light torches, but they do turn their backs. The audience is over. That night, your camp is quiet. The fire burns low. Akhenaten sits alone, sketching something into a stone circle's raised names. He hums a hymn to a 10 under his breath. You catch lines like, "You rise for all, yet they turn away. Still you shine." You want to ask if he's disappointed. You don't. Instead, you check the perimeter for spies, bandits, or worse, ambassadors from Memphis here to collect the wandering monarch before he embarrasses the sun further. You find a scroll tucked into your satchel the next morning. It's written in Akhenaten's hand. One day they will understand. One day there will be no gods but light. You keep it. The return journey is quiet. As you leave Canaan behind, the sun rises behind you, huge, red, uncaring. Akhenaten doesn't look back. He doesn't have to. The light is always in front of him, and whether the world follows or not, that's its problem. You've carried bodies before, or parts of them. It's not your usual gig, but in Egypt, death travels more than most people ever do alive. Today's assignment, escorting a mummy. Not just any mummy, a pharaoh. Dead-wrapped, scented, and now on tour. You're crouched beside an ox cart creaking through a dusty road somewhere between Abydos and Thebes. It's draped in black linen, its cargo swaying slightly with every bump. Behind you is a caravan of priests, guards, scribes, and one very moody embalmer who insists that he's still listening and keeps whispering advice to the linen-wrapped corpse. Welcome to Pharaoh Transit Service, late New Kingdom edition. Here's your historical fact. Several royal mummies were moved after burial, some more than once. During times of political upheaval, tomb robbing, or priestly reform, bodies of pharaohs were relocated for safekeeping. The most famous example, the royal cache at Deir el-Bahari, where priests secretly reburied over 40 royal mummies to protect them from looters. Your quirky tidbit. One of the mummies, Ramesses II, was eventually shipped to Paris in the 20th century, complete with a passport issued by the Egyptian government, listing his occupation as king deceased. Bureaucracy eternal. But back in your time, it's chaos. The corpse in question is Setnakht, a short-reigned but powerful pharaoh who ruled like a storm and died mid-temple project. His original tomb compromised, his priests dead or missing. His successor, Ramesses III, has declared his father's spirit too restless to remain buried in defiled ground. Hence the relocation, under cover of night, with full honors and minimal fanfare. The caravan takes the back roads, ancient donkey trails, dry riverbeds, even one detour through a goat path, where you nearly lose the entire embalming team to a collapsing rock shelf. You camp in secret each night. No torches, no chants. By day 3, the linen around the mummy has begun to unravel slightly. The embalmer freaks out. That was blessed by 7 priests and a jackal. You spend an hour rewrapping a dead king's left ankle by moonlight. Royal service is rarely glamorous. On day 5, something odd happens. You stop at a forgotten way station, a ruined shrine to Ptah. Dusty, abandoned. Nothing but a cracked altar and the remains of 2 clay offering bowls. The priests suggest a quick ceremony. You all agree. They light a small fire, offer dates, pour beer, recite a hymn. And then the cart shudders. Not the oxen, not the wheels. The mummy moves, just slightly, just enough. Everyone freezes, even the embalmer. You step closer. The air grows heavy. You swear, you hear a breath, or a sigh, or a laugh. Then silence. One priest mutters something about unbound spirits. Another whispers, "We've gone too far." But no one turns back. Historians still argue whether Egyptian beliefs allowed for posthumous judgment errors. if a pharaoh could be moved in death without offending the gods. Some claim these relocations were only physical. Others say the soul might follow wandering, searching for its body, angry at the disturbance. You push the cart forward. At night, the dreams begin. Setnacht appears to you in linen and gold, crowned and scowling. He doesn't speak, just points at something behind you. When you turn, you see his broken tombstones split, robbers fleeing, his name scratched off the walls. He looks disappointed. Not in them, in you. You wake to find the embalmer watching you. He came to me too, he says. Told me to hurry up. On the final day, you approach the Valley of the Kings, but not the usual entrances. This is a side path, barely a cleft between cliffs. The place is unmarked. Secret. The priests form a circle. A chant begins. He returns. He rests. Let the name be known again. A stone door, previously hidden under layers of debris, is uncovered. Inside, a small chamber, plain but secure. No gold, no paintings, just a carved niche and a sandstone box. The mummy is placed inside. No fanfare, no trumpet, just a quiet goodbye. The embalmer leaves an amulet, an eye of Horus, worn and chipped. You don't ask where he got it. Then the door is sealed. No one speaks for a long time. You leave under cover of dusk, every man in the caravan a little quieter, a little more careful with his steps. The wind whispers through the valley. Setnacht. You think his name just once, to help it echo. Because in Egypt, to say a name is to keep it alive. Years later, the tomb will be lost, covered again, forgotten, until someone digs too deep and wonders why their dreams suddenly fill with sandals on stone and kings who do not sleep. Some pharaohs die once, others travel long after. It starts with a knock, not the gentle kind, the kind of knock that makes walls flinch. You're in Deir el-Medina, the village of tomb builders, tucked into a sun-scorched ravine west of Thebes. It's late. The wine has gone warm. The air smells of ink, limestone, dust, and regret. And the man at the door. He's holding a scroll sealed in wax and wearing a face like he just saw a ghost, and the ghost filed a complaint. There's a problem in the valley. And just like that, your relaxing stay in the most secretive village in Egypt turns into a death-cursed detour. Because tonight, someone's broken into a royal tomb. Here's your historical fact. Deir el-Medina was home to the artisans and builders who carved the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. It was a highly organized, literate, and shockingly well-paid community, with strict routines, ritual observances, and its own court of law. But despite their loyalty and elite status, tomb robberies still happened. And sometimes, from the inside. Your quirky tidbit. One actual trial record from the village reveals that workers and even foremen were occasionally involved in thefts, sneaking into partially sealed tombs and extracting valuables under cover of ritual or extra work shifts. One confession involved a worker smuggling gold out in a hollowed-out loaf of bread. Baked greed. You follow the messenger down winding desert paths into the deeper valley, where no tourists go past tomb entrances, half-sealed, half-forgotten. He leads you to a narrow shaft behind a fake rock outcrop. You descend by rope. It smells wrong, too warm, too stale. And when your sandals hit the bottom, the tomb is open, not cracked, not disturbed, open, chisel marks fresh, dust still settling. Inside the wall, paintings, divine scenes of Osiris, Anubis, and solar barks are defaced. The sacred spells scratched, the sarcophagus tipped. Whoever did this knew exactly where to look. You turn to the man beside you, an older scribe, pale as salt. This was done by someone with access, he whispers. This was no random theft. This was a message. You return to Deir el Medina under torchlight. The village, always quiet, now feels silent in a different way. Curtains closed, doors bolted. You pass a boy sweeping a doorstep who won't meet your eyes. You know that look. It's not fear of gods. It's fear of neighbors. A secret tribunal is called. Not in the court hall. That would be too official. No, this happens in the scribe's house behind a curtained doorway where the village foreman, 3 senior builders, and 1 badly shaken priest gather in a circle speaking in whispers. We think it's Connie. He's been asking about maps. His wife suddenly has jewelry she didn't before. You don't know Connie, but you soon learn he was a layout scribe, one of the few allowed access to the original tomb plans. He's been missing since yesterday. You find him the next morning, or what's left of him. Half buried in the sand behind a wine press. Mouth open, eyes closed. No wounds, no blood. Just a faint burn mark on his chest in the shape of a falcon. No one claims responsibility, not even the gods. The villagers gather to recite protective spells, verses from the Book of the Dead, inked on torn linen and wrapped around the corners of their homes. Offerings are doubled. Cats are painted with eyeliner to look fiercer. One old stonemason tells you the truth between sobs. We didn't mean to take everything, just what we were owed. And there it is. Historians still argue whether tomb robbers were always criminals or sometimes desperate artisans cheated by corrupt overseers. Many of the Deir el Medina workers died poor, unpaid, or quietly erased. Some believed they had earned their share of eternity, but the gods didn't care. Later that night, someone knocks again. It's a boy. He hands you a note scrawled in charcoal. They buried the real map in the old well. You go, alone, because of course you do. The well is dry, dead quiet. Inside, behind a loose stone, you find a palm leaf map showing unmarked tombs, stashed loot locations, and a list of names. Some crossed out, others circled. You know this map isn't meant for scholars. It's not legacy. It's survival. You burn it. Not because you're noble, because you've seen what happens when people chase ghosts with debts. By morning, the village has returned to normal. Tools clink, ink flows, the smell of plaster and ambition returns. But you know it's changed. The tombs remain glittering in darkness. The names still chant from the walls, but every builder here walks a little quieter. Every scribe writes with heavier hands. Some trips are about glory, some are about mystery, and some they're about keeping the dead exactly where you left them. You're floating on a sacred lake, somewhere between midnight and madness. The stars blur above you. The reeds sway in silence. The water is glassy black, so still it looks like another sky turned upside down. The only sound is the soft splash of the priest's paddle and the occasional grunt of a hippo who might or might not be divine. You've been invited or possibly lured into a ritual known only as the Journey of the Lotus Path. Pharaoh Osorkon II ordered it at dusk with a smile that said, "Trust me, this will be enlightening." Now here you are, drifting beneath moonlight, trying not to think about the fact that your feet are inside a boat that smells heavily of both lotus oil and crocodile dung. You're not alone. Beside you, priests in leopard skin sashes murmur chants. One of them holds a copper dish filled with blue lotus petals soaked in wine. Another is gently shaking a rattle made from a mummified cat's tail. The pharaoh himself is at the bow, eyes closed, body swaying gently, not to the current, but to whatever he's seeing behind his eyelids. Here's your historical fact. The sacred lakes of Egyptian temples, like those at Karnak or Tanis, were real features used for purification, ritual, and initiation. They weren't just aesthetic. Priests and sometimes the pharaoh would immerse themselves before ceremonies to wash away chaos and open the body to divine clarity. Your quirky tidbit. There's a long-standing theory that Blue Lotus wasn't just symbolic of rebirth, it was psychoactive. Chemical studies suggest the flower contains mild sedatives or narcotic compounds, which means yes, your pharaoh might be divinely communing, or he might be extremely high. You're handed the dish of lotus wine. Drink, says the priest. The god sees best with blurred eyes. You hesitate. You drink. It tastes like perfumed soil and old grapes. Your vision tilts sideways. The stars ripple. The boat expands. You feel a laugh coming from inside your bones. The chant continues. We sail the lake of night. We seek the face of light. We pass through sleep into the dream. Your oar dips lazily in the water. For a moment, you swear it moves on its own. The pharaoh rises. I am reborn from the lotus. I am the first morning. I am the voice that spoke the sun. He says it not as a man performing a rite, but as someone remembering something he lived 1,000 years ago. And then he jumps. Right into the lake. The priests don't flinch. You, however, start choking on lotus wine. The water closes over him, calm, dark. A pause. 10 heartbeats, 20, 30. You're about to scream when he surfaces, slowly, calmly. In his hand, a black stone covered in carved eyes. He climbs back aboard the boat, dripping moonlight. The gods see me, he says. Now they will speak. Historians still argue whether these sacred lake rites were meditative rituals or veiled use of trance-inducing substances. Some suggest the pharaoh entered a hypnagogic state to receive prophecy. Others believe the water symbolized Nun, the primordial chaos, and the pharaoh diving into it symbolized death and rebirth. Whatever this was, it worked. The pharaoh begins to speak in a low voice, answering questions no one asked. Build in stone, not brick. The child will betray. Do not trust the moon at dawn. The priests write everything down. You try to ask if he's still in there. He turns to you. Do you know your secret name? You blink. He smiles like he already knows it. The boat turns, gliding back toward the temple dock. Your head swims. The stars seem brighter, or closer. The wind carries words you don't understand, but feel anyway. On the shore, a new group of priests awaits with fresh linen, warm towels, and something that smells like fried onions. Reality is returning, sort of. The pharaoh steps onto land, shakes the water from his robes, looks lighter, brighter, reborn. We will change the calendar, he says to no one in particular. It's wrong. Time moves backward. No one argues. That night you lie on your back in the scribe's quarters, staring at the ceiling, which now feels thin, like you could poke a finger through it and touch the stars. You dream of lotus flowers opening in reverse. You dream of the pharaoh walking across a lake made of glass. You dream of crocodiles whispering your name. In the morning, you wake with ink on your hands and no memory of writing. It says, the path is water. The answer is silence. The lake knows your face. You crumple the note. Burn it. Don't tell anyone. Some trips go far. Others go in. And a few never truly end. You're cold. Which is weird because you're in Egypt. But the desert wind has teeth tonight, and the stars above the Giza plateau flicker like nervous eyes. You pull your cloak tighter as you approach the campfire nestled near the western face of the Great Pyramid. You're not here to climb it. You're here to sleep beside it. Because Pharaoh Necho, too, astronomy enthusiast, casual conqueror, and occasional insomniac, has decided this is the best place to consult the stars. No palace, no temple, Just the sand, a parchment sky, and a royal obsession with what's up there. You settle onto a wool mat with the rest of the chosen inner circle. 2 scribes, one particularly smug priest of Seshat, goddess of measurement and astronomy, and a servant whose job appears to be making tea and pointing at constellations with flair. The pharaoh sits cross-legged on a stone block that's definitely not a throne wrapped in a heavy cloak embroidered with stars. He stares upward, like the cosmos owes him a personal update. Here's your historical fact. Egyptian priests and astronomers observed the night sky meticulously, using stars to align temples, predict floods, and track time. The deacons were groups of stars that rose every 10 days, used in constructing the ancient calendar long before sundials or hourglasses ever hit the scene. And your quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe the pyramid complex wasn't just a tomb site, but also a celestial map with shafts inside the Great Pyramid aligning with specific stars such as Sirius and Orion's belt. The ancient architects weren't just builders, they were stargazers. Tonight's purpose, charting a possible star omen, a rare alignment said to herald the opening of a new era, or doom, or better crop yields. Honestly, opinions vary. The priest of Seshat points to the northeast horizon. There see Sopdet rises. Sopdet Sirius, the star of rebirth of flood season of divine timing. The pharaoh nods, murmuring verses under his breath. She returns before the flood. The Nile stirs in her wake. A hush falls over the group as more stars emerge. Orion, Canis Major. That weird cluster someone insists is a turtle, but honestly looks more like a spoon. A metal tablet is rolled out, engraved with stars and tiny notches. A stylus is dipped in ochre ink. You are told to write everything you see exactly as it appears. Even the stars that feel like they're moving, especially those. The pharaoh speaks again. The stars do not lie, but they whisper. We must listen sideways. You make a note. Pharaoh recommends listening sideways. Probably metaphorical. Probably. The priest explains the next ritual: sleep beneath the pyramid head, pointed toward the northern sky heart, exposed to the divine breath. It's said that when the mind dreams here, gods whisper ideas that make pyramids look like sandcastles. You're skeptical. Then again, last week, you watched a man float on lotus wine and commune with the sun, so... The group spreads out along the northern base. A soft glow from oil lamps flickers against the limestone blocks, giving the illusion that the pyramid itself is breathing. You lie down. The ground is warm beneath you, like it's holding daytime in its bones. You stare at the stars until your eyes water. Then you close them, and you dream. You dream of stairways rising into the sky, of silver glyphs etched across black voids, of the pharaoh walking upside down across constellations collecting stars like fruit. You hear a voice. The stars are not gods. They are windows, and some are open. You wake with sand in your teeth and an inked star symbol drawn across your left palm. No one saw who did it. The pharaoh is already awake, sketching something onto a sheet of papyrus. It looks like a spiral coiling around a pyramid. He shows it to the priest, who frowns deeply and mutters, "That's not possible." You decide to stay out of it. At dawn, the group climbs to the pyramid's east base to greet the sun. The first light of Ra pierces the horizon, catching the limestone blocks and turning them gold. The pharaoh raises his hand. The gods live in the sky, but they write in stone. The wind rises. Someone's blanket is carried away. No one chases it. Historians still argue whether the Egyptian fascination with the stars was primarily religious or mathematical. The truth, probably both. Because what better way to track eternity than with something that never burns out. As you pack up the camp, the scribe beside you mutters. The Pharaoh says we build a new observatory, underground, beneath the sands. You blink. Won't the sand get in the lenses? He shrugs. We'll measure it sideways. Of course, some journeys go up rivers, others down tomb shafts. But this one, it went upward, past clouds, past gods, right into the cold, eternal hum of the sky. It's a crawl space, narrow, cramped, airless, and you're elbow deep in darkness behind the walls of a tomb no one talks about in polite society. Even the Pharaoh doesn't mention this one out loud. This isn't a ceremonial promenade or a holy lake float. This is a secret tunnel journey, and it's the kind where you start questioning every life choice that led you here, including the one involving goat cheese stuffed dates at lunch. Your knees scrape limestone. The torch flickers dangerously close to your eyebrows. Behind you, the royal architect mutters to himself about load-bearing stress points and improper vent spacing. Welcome to the side of Egyptian royal power no one etches into temple walls. The claustrophobic, winding, trap-riddled engineering miracles that protect royal corpses from eternal inconvenience. Here's your historical fact. Egyptian tombs, especially in the Valley of the Kings, were built with complex tunnel systems, false shafts, and trap corridors designed to confuse robbers and protect buried treasure. Tomb KV5, for instance, has over 100 chambers, and some tombs extend over 100 meters into the rock. Your quirky tidbit. Some royal tombs included acoustic traps, chambers designed to create echoing sounds when someone entered, so robbers would believe they were being followed by ghosts. Ancient jump scare technology. The tunnel you're in. It's one of the Pharaoh's private passageways hidden behind a movable panel in the back of a shrine near Luxor. You followed him here at sunset, along with a group of hand-picked engineers' guards and one very smug tomb priest who keeps saying, "I told you it existed." Why is the Pharaoh here? He's not dying yet, but he's worried. He wants a new kind of tomb, something no one will find. Not for centuries, maybe not ever. And you're the chronicler. You're here to observe, to record, to crawl behind royalty into the dark. The tunnel leads downward. The air turns thick, heavy with limestone dust and the scent of old incense. You descend through a sharp curve, a serpentine passage so narrow you have to twist your hips sideways. You're sweating, breathing hard, trying not to panic. Then, a chamber. Small, carved smooth. Empty except for one thing, a carved niche in the far wall, shaped exactly like a human. The Pharaoh runs his hand over it. "This is where I vanish," he says. You blink. "Pardon," he gestures. "A decoy tomb. My body will be buried elsewhere. This will be filled with empty linen false canopic jars and enough curses to keep amateurs away." He's serious. He begins giving orders. The priest starts scribing, "Here lies the Pharaoh in silence eternal." But he writes it in mirror glyphs meant to be read only from the underworld. Meanwhile, the architect points to a section of wall. "We can add a smoke trap here. If someone lights a torch, the room fills with soot, no visibility, and panic." The Pharaoh nods approvingly. This is what Egyptian power looks like behind the gold and God's paranoia carved in stone. Historians still debate the function of these tunnels. Were they practical anti-theft designs, symbolic journeys through the duat, the underworld, or secret passageways for priests to conduct rituals after the tomb was sealed? Some fringe theorists believe they were escape routes for pharaohs who faked their deaths. You snort, until the Pharaoh turns to you and says, "If I ever vanish before my time, remember this place." You stop snorting. The group moves deeper. You reach a vertical shaft, narrow, chiseled downward at an aggressive angle. A rope is lowered. You descend. One slip, and you're the next accidental offering to Osiris. At the bottom, a second chamber. Rougher, more natural, unfinished. The pharaoh looks around. This is where my shadow will wait. You don't ask what that means. You're led out eventually after hours underground. You emerge covered in chalk dust, your scroll damp with sweat, your sense of direction completely gone. The passageway is sealed behind you. A priest recites a curse over the seam. May those who seek find only silence. May those who listen hear only wind. May those who steal be swallowed by shadow. You memorize it mostly because it's terrifying. That night, the pharaoh speaks quietly to you over a basin of lotus water. Even a god must plan for fear. Even a king must prepare to disappear. You nod, and then he laughs. Besides, it's more fun if they never know where I am. He's not wrong. Some trips are about arrival, others escape. But this one is about vanishing so well you live forever. You are walking backwards, not because you're lost, not because you're playing a game, but because you're following the pharaoh's funeral bark, and no one turns their back on the dead king. The procession moves like a dream, baked in gold, slow, solemn, surreal. Dust billows in silent plumes as Pharaoh Shabaka, Lord of the Two Lands, Father of Eternity, is carried to his final rest. His mask glints in the sun. His hands, crossed, gloved in gold, clutch the crook and flail. Around him, the world holds its breath. You are the royal scribe, and your last assignment is to walk every step of his afterlife journey with him. Here's your historical fact. Egyptian royal funerals were elaborate multi-day events, including mummification rituals, the opening of the mouth ceremony, transportation of the body by river and land, and multiple stopping points for prayers and rites. The dead pharaoh became Osiris, Lord of the Dead, and his journey mirrored mythological passages through the underworld. Your quirky tidbit. During some royal funerals, mourners wore wax masks of gods or jackals to trick the spirits into thinking the pharaoh was guarded by divine entities. It also probably helped ward off nosy ghosts. Today's road winds along the west bank of the Nile where the sun dies each evening. The land of the dead. The heat is unbearable. Drums beat a slow, two-heart rhythm. Priests chant in cycles. Behind you, women wail in practiced poetic sorrow. The air smells of myrrh, resin, and scorched linen. You pass a shrine. The priests stop. A ceremony begins offerings to Hathor, mistress of the West, who receives the pharaoh's soul. Beer is poured onto the sand. Bread is buried. A small bull is sacrificed, its blood caught in a silver bowl, its eyes painted closed. You do not flinch. This is tradition. This is eternity. The next stop is the Cave of Silence, a natural hollow once used as a meditation chamber for priests. Today, it's for whispering secrets to the dead. Each member of the procession steps inside alone. You wait your turn. When you enter, it's cool, dim. The echo of your own breath sounds ancient. You kneel. You whisper. You said you'd return. No answer. You join the others at the riverbank. The golden bark is lowered into the Nile. It floats like a dream. On board the pharaoh, still regal, surrounded by incense burners and two jackal-headed priests who haven't blinked in hours. Historians still argue whether the boat used for the funeral was symbolic or functional. Some evidence suggests that bodies were ferried by actual rivercraft, while others believe mock boats carried through the desert did the trick. Either way, the myth demanded the pharaoh cross water like Ra sailing through the Duat each night. The bark docks at a small inlet. The final procession begins. You climb the steps to the tomb cut into the cliff. Carved into the rock are scenes from the Book of Caverns, gods devouring sinners, serpents coiled around, time the sun's eye burning through shadow. This tomb is deep, cold. The sarcophagus room smells like old thunder. The priests perform the last rites. The opening of the mouth ritual is performed by the high priest, using a ceremonial adze. A calf's leg is brushed against the pharaoh's mouth. He can now speak in the afterlife, or shout, or command. They lower him into the stone coffin. You place your scroll on his chest. I wrote your stories, you whisper. Every trip. Even the one where you got food poisoning in Byblos. He doesn't laugh. But maybe the tomb shakes a little. The lid is sealed. The door is closed. You step outside into light. And just like that, he is a god. Some say you change when you die. Others say you return to who you really were. The pharaoh's tomb is just one of thousands. But his stories, they live. Etched in stone. Whispered by winds. Written in ink that doesn't fade. And you've been there. For every trip. The lion hunts. The dream lakes. The exile. The volcano. The stars. The schemes. The whispered names. The secret tombs. The floating petals. The stolen hearts. The returning ghosts. Not everyone gets to walk beside gods. But you did. And you wrote it down. The last procession returns in silence. You stay behind. Just for a moment. Because as the sun dips below the cliffs and the tomb's shadow stretches across the sand, you feel it. A breeze from the door. The faintest hum. Like breath, or laughter, or someone turning the page. The fire is low now. The drums are gone. The chants have faded. The stars above the Nile return to stillness, blinking soft and slow. You're lying under the open sky, wrapped in linen, your mind echoing with visions, processions through firelit tombs, boats gliding across black water, whispers beneath stone laughter behind veils. You've journeyed across dynasties and deserts. You've seen pharaohs rise in gold, fall in dust, and float beyond the reach of time. And now, it's quiet. Your thoughts slow like the river winding towards sleep. You remember the scent of blue lotus, the hum of a sacred lake, the clink of obsidian amulets in the hands of priests who've seen too much, the dreams stitched into starlight and tucked into royal beds. A falcon calls in the distance, or maybe it's just wind through reeds. It doesn't matter. The sand is cool. The gods are resting. And whatever curses still linger behind tomb doors, they're not meant for you. You've walked every mile of this journey. You've sat beside the pharaohs, not as a servant, not as a stranger, but as a witness. And now it's time to sleep. Let your body sink. Let the memories blur. Let the Nile carry your breath downstream to places only dreams can go. The trip is over, but the story never ends. End of script. Sweet dreams.